Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of what a kid Naruto was saved by his legendary grandmother. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The first words that come to mind when someone describes Miss Griffin are strict, frightening, unyielding, and angry. One of the two people who would characterize her in any other way was, as far as she knew, long dead, and the other had a quarrel with her 12 years ago and had never spoken to her again. In the comfort and seclusion of her office, she was going through her papers like a fox in a henhouse, but then she paused and let out a sigh. She put down her pen and pulled an old photo from a locket concealed in a secret pocket after looking around and sending out a magical probe to make sure no one was watching. It featured her when she was younger, but in some way beside her, smiling, was a young woman with the man's hair but her eyes, and a man with a powerful jaw and gorgeous red hair with a hint of gray, an image of better and simpler times, an image of her missing daughter and her deceased husband. In a tone that would have shocked anyone who knew her, she reflected, 12 years. Perhaps it's time I swallow my pride. I could go into retirement, perhaps, relax for the remainder of my life. I'm sure Caroline would love to be in authority here and hand out the punishments instead of receiving them for once. She began using the lesser-known features when an eyeball on spider legs walked onto the desk. Enveros ocularis verito Caroline, she said, and the eye blinked, transforming into an orb. She watched it travel toward a world devoid of magic and settle on a village with 4 faces carved into the mountain behind it. After that, it flew through the streets before landing on a gravestone with a trembling voice. She said, "No." Before reading the plaque, the picture raced through the village and rested on a small, malnourished child who had signs of demonic possession and a horribly thin body that showed signs of constant abuse. "Here lies Kushina Uzumaki. Caroline, you abandoned your name?" she threw at them. "Verito Uzumaki," she commanded. As she watched the child tremble in terror, she questioned, trembling with anger, "Those eyes and that jaw, he is Caroline's without a doubt. Why is he hiding behind a dumpster? Well, it looks like I'll have to stave off retirement for a short while I care for my 3-year-old grandson. Dispelleris ocularis," she said while ignoring the gaze as it scuttled away. She got to her feet, her face twisted with anger and focused behind one of the curtains. She stepped onto a tiny pentagram. "Inveros tempudus duresin Uzumaki," she spat out, and as the design came to life, she sank into it. As a flash of pale green light burst behind him, Naruto let out a startled cry. He attempted to shove himself into the dumpster in the hopes of escaping the torture that would follow, but a very severe and unforgiving-looking woman emerged from the light and glared down at him. She had very pale green skin, dark shadows around her eyes that appeared to be makeup, and a high flared collar on a confining dress. She exuded precise control in everything, including her hairstyle and posture. She was slender, with a slightly bony face and a perfect hourglass figure. "Terrified. Who are you?" he asked. Griffin calmly studied the child before her, but at this close range, the demon's apparent raw power almost carried her away. Within himself, he saw more of Caroline now that she was near him, along with an unidentified man who was probably the father. She was struck by the power of the possessing one when she first saw his dual auras, but she also felt a twinge of familiarity with his own. It was the same shade of dark blue that Caroline possessed. Faith and creativity were paramount. She responded to him after a protracted moment that seemed to go on forever with only a faint trace of warmth. She said, "My name is Lady Griffin. I am your grandmother." Someone yelled from the end of the alley, "There he is." The woman found the damn fox. And a sizable crowd gathered. In no time the crowd erupted in cries of, "Kill it! Kill the Kyuubi!" and charged at them with a variety of real and fake weapons, including rocks, knives, bats, and broken bottles. Griffin gave them all a glare as icy as an Arctic blizzard before merely raising her hand, blocking the way with enormous spikes of stone. To preserve her grandson's remaining innocence, she tried to stop herself from killing the idiots by saying, "Come on, it is not safe here." Her gentleness in picking him up would have sent all of her students into a state of near catatonia. A voice behind them said, "Wait, where are you taking Naruto?" Griffin spat at the elderly man who sighed, "I am taking my grandson away from this pit that dares to attack him." So you're Griffin," sighed Sarutobi. "Before she died, Kushina no Caroline told me about you, and I had hoped she wasn't delusional. This scroll is basic chakra and sealing instructions. It will allow him access to the many training techniques and many finer points of his heritage sealed within this scroll. I'm sorry I couldn't do more," Sarutobi said as she handed a brief scroll to that Griffin took slowly. "Enveros tempudus cloud tower," Griffin uttered, and in a flash of green light, she and Naruto vanished. Sarutobi lowered his head to conceal his tears and said, "Good luck, Naruto." In search of guidance, one of his Anbu questioned, Lord Hokage? In order to smoke away his resentment and toast Naruto to a new and better life that he so richly deserved, he said, arrest the crowd, I will be in my office, and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Griffin exited the Pentagon at Cloud Tower while still holding Naruto. Her tone was half gentle as she said, welcome home. She placed him on a chair, not letting her nervousness show. She took the one next to him and said, now Naruto, I'm sure you have many questions. He continued to fire off questions until Griffin raised her hand. Where are we? Are you really my grandma? What about my parents? Did they leave me? Why does everyone hate me? Why is your skin green? How did you do that thing with the spikes? How? He asked. First, we are in Cloud Tower, an academy for witches, to learn exactly what their limits are and develop their powers. Yes, I really am your grandmother. Your mother, my little Caroline, is dead. I don't know about your father. No, I doubt that they left you. I know Caroline would never have done that. I don't know why those idiots hate you, but you will never have to see them again. My skin is like this as an after effect of a normally lethal curse which I survived. The thing with the spikes was magic, which I can teach you. Now we have to get you a room, some more proper clothing, and a solid meal. I will answer more questions then. Griffin said crisply, glad the boy wasn't in a blind panic. Hundreds of thousands of things could go wrong right now, and it's precisely what she. In order to reorganize the atoms of his clothes into a cozy black sweater, jeans, and leather sandals, she sent a tiny amount of energy as he looked over them. He exclaimed, wow! The color scheme blended in perfectly with the decor, and they were cozy. She stood up and said, now come along. There's an empty room right by my own. It's yours now. Naruto slid out of his chair and trailed behind her as she set a firm but gentle pace. Through the Kyuubi, Naruto felt the magic pulsing and throbbing all around him. Wow! This place is amazing. I can feel energy pounding everywhere. Boom bum boom bum boom bum, it's like a big heart. He exclaimed, referring to the torches. Naruto questioned, hey, do those ever burn out, Grandma? She walked over and laid the scroll on the big 4-poster bed, saying, no, they are enchanted not to. Now this is your room. I'm going to leave this here and we are going to the dining tower to eat. It was a 2-story circular room with a living and sleeping area at the bottom, furnished with a desk with a recliner, a closet, a dresser, a bed, and a spiral staircase that led to a small library on various magical theories for a wealthy student who wished to learn about all aspects of magic. It was an ordinary room. The border of the carpet was patterned after Celtic bands. The use of dark blue, black, gray, and dark brown gave it a somber yet cozy vibe. Naruto nodded, still unsure of how he experienced the energy, as she said, now come on, it's time to get you something to eat. He couldn't see it, hear it, or feel it in any way that he was aware of. He just was aware of its actions. Unsure of himself, Naruto said, Grandma, I feel energy, but I don't. How am I feeling it? Griffin turned to him and smiled slightly. As she considered how to tell the school about Naruto, she clarified, it's an additional sense that magic users have. You are sensing the magic in this place. Just as there are physical senses, there are magical ones as well. She thought it would be most appropriate to use the new term in her welcome speech, which was in 3 days. In addition, there are some threats of severe punishment for anyone who bothers him. I must first notify the faculty. To be honest, they dislike surprises. I don't either, she thought. Now Naruto, I'm going to introduce you to some of the teachers here. They are as strict as I am and have proven themselves worthy of respect. Naruto nodded and remarked, like the Anbu. Griffin, who was a little unfamiliar with the term, said, yes, like the Anbu. I presume they are elites. Naruto, who had been saved by the Anbu many times and had a great deal of respect for them despite his youth, exclaimed with excitement, I don't know what presum means, but they're best of the best right under old man Hokage. Glad to have a comparison, Griffin remarked. Well, here at Cloud Tower I am like the Hokage and the teachers here are like the Anbu, the best right under me. They arrived at the teacher's private table after making a few more turns in the hallway and passing through a tiny doorway. In a proper suit and bowler hat, a pale man with long dark hair said, good evening, Mistress Griffon, and who is this little Voon? He had long tapered ears and odd slitted eyes with a faint hint of red in the whites, giving him the appearance of gentry who had never seen daylight. There was a hint of Russian in his voice. Griffin pointed to him and said, this knight is my grandson Naruto. He bowed awkwardly and almost toppled over. Mr. Knight said, respectful little Voon, isn't he? After turning to smoke and moving across the table, they reformed in front of Naruto, lowering themselves to his level. Ah, I see it now. He is Caroline's without a doubt needs a fattening up too. My name is Mr. Nightmare. I am an Alpha DRRREAM demon. High teach transformation in DRRREAM Sorcery, and welcome to Cloud Tower. Nervously, Naruto said, and nice to meet you, to the acknowledged demon. After saying evilly, "Do not be alarmed. Hai do not bite children. Hai prefer an older vintage and a darker soul you have a few years before Ha'd be interested in your RR dreams." He turned into mist and retreated to his seat. He then raised his wine glass towards Naruto in a toast before he drank nervously. Griffin pointed to the twins on the left and right, saying, "The twins are Professor Edeltrude and Professor Zarathustra in that order." They grinned at his perplexed expression and said in stereo, "Nice to meet you." Griffin told him, "Cloud Tower is our home, but the other teachers are on vacation right now." One twin said, "By the dragon, she's smiling." The other twin instantly received a glare that would have killed her instantly without leaving a corpse if any magic had been channeled, and she stumbled out of breath, terrified. "Sorry, mistress," she said. Knight questioned, "So that exactly happened to Caroline?" Griffin hurriedly stated, "She died, under the moniker of Kashina Uzumaki on a foreign world." It was clear that he did not want to discuss the subject. Edeltrude aka Zarathustra, referred to as E and Z for simplicity's sake, shook her head and said, "Oh no, she was a first-class hexer, a troublemaker to the bone, but it was always worth watching. Oh, I know, sister, she could plague a person's life without a single drop of magic. Her pranks were on the level of the highest curses." Z, also known as E, replied, and Knight laughed. He removed his hat and held it to his chest in what is considered the highest respect for an Alp. "Hi RR, remember when she decided I need a lesson in humility, and locked me in a BRR room closet for a week? The girl had talent, and Cloud Tower is a little weaker without it," he said, "and let us hope that the next generation carries that same SS spark of greatness." His gaze was fixed on Naruto, who grinned unconfidently and scratched the back of his neck. Knight was difficult for him to understand, but he could tell that he was both happy for him and sad for him. Griffin uttered the words, "Yes. Well, now that introductions are finished, it is time to eat." He was not sure if he should be pleased at her daughter's high praise or upset that they would not stop talking about her loss. Naruto grinned at her and sighed to himself after she hastily picked up a couple of tiny sandwiches and placed them on the plate in front of the seat he had crawled onto. Indeed, they begin learning manners at this age. I almost forgot it's been so long, she thought. As was customary, they ate in silence for the most part. In contrast to Althea, the Cloud Tower faculty did not value rumors. "Do I need to teach him etiquette? Since etiquette is completely optional at this witch's school, does he fall under this rule since he is not a student? When Caroline was this age, did I not have this internal conflict? Yes, I did, but I chose not to teach her etiquette." However, Naruto presents a marginally more complex problem. Here, being polite would be unnecessary and, to be honest, would result in him being actively made fun of by the student body. She nodded inwardly as he practically crawled onto the table to get more sandwiches. She thought, "I will help him develop a more forceful personality. That will certainly help him later in life and keep him out of just as much trouble as it would put him in." Knight grinned and laughed. "He's got zone big balls on, I am." Can anyone blame Griffin for thinking she was glaring at him? He sat back down and ate in silence. Caroline thought, "Yes, he'll do just fine," and gave Naruto a little smile of approval, which Naruto returned 10 times over. "Wherever you are, you can rest in peace now." There were no issues or conversations during the meal. Griffin got to his feet and gestured for Naruto to follow, which he did with great enthusiasm. She was one of the nicest people he knew, but he had to admit that she was quiet and a little frightening. She provided him with a large room, nice clothes, delicious food, and protection. She lowered herself to his level and escorted him back to her office. "Now Naruto, I have a lot of paperwork to fill out and won't be able to keep you busy. So I want you to explore as much of Cloud Tower as possible, but wear these. They have a detection charm on them and will make you immune to mind-affecting magic and illusions," she said, and a small pair of square brown sunglasses floated out of a drawer that opened on its own and into her hand. "They will let me find you in time for dinner. They will also let you find your way around. You just have to say out loud where you want to go and they will point the way," she said, and gave him a brief kiss on his forehead. Naruto simply gave her a hug, which she graciously returned. "I'm sorry I wasn't able to bring you here sooner," she said. "Now if you get into trouble, don't get caught." Naruto chuckled a little before she pushed him away. He fled, and he waved goodbye as he turned a corner out of view. Griffin got to her feet with a sigh. "It just happened so fast. Mere hours ago I was simply a headmistress. Now I am a grandmother to a demon-possessed child and have lost my only daughter. The paperwork may wait, I need answers," she said with tenacity. As one of the eyes moved up onto the desk, she moved to her chair and took a seat. "Inveros ocularis virido precatus signer Naruto," she said, and the eye blinked and changed to a crystal orb as before, displaying every important moment in Naruto's life, from the most recent to the most distant. She grinned when she saw her saving him, but then she became almost cataclysmic as it revealed multiple beatings and other mistreatment, with her rage only being controlled by the Hokage's generosity. Only a few hours after his birth did it reveal anything she was searching for, aside from a potential future landscape smear. She noticed a strong-looking young man who resembled Naruto in many ways, holding him tenderly while standing atop the biggest toad she had ever seen and facing a fox that was larger than Cloud Tower. It was sheltered by a close-range but extremely lethal aura of flame, and its 9 tails wreaked havoc as they swept close to the ground. Behind them, she saw a white specter with gray skin and horns emerge. The man kissed Naruto gently on the forehead as the specter stabbed his arm through him. Naruto and the specter then stretched out towards the beast, which grew even bigger than it was, encircling the entire creature in its hand before retreating into Naruto, where it released its grip and went through the man, grabbing his soul and devouring it. Her grandson's stomach then developed a seal, indicating that the monster was imprisoned there as the orb displayed yet another scene. She looked up and said sadly, "Oh Naruto, what a burden." Caroline was clearly dying from complications, and he was only a few minutes old. "Kushina, I'm sorry, I doubt even my student Tsunade, for all her medical talent, couldn't have given you more time," sadly replied the Hokage. He said, "I have good news though, he's perfectly healthy, and is likely to live a long prosperous life." She smiled at him tenderly, her skin still gradually losing its color. "Sarutobi, my mother, will come looking for me eventually. And she'll find him. She is a witch, has green skin, and is very strict, but she will without question look after him. She's one of the 3 pillars of magic. She will take him to Cloud Tower," Caroline said while taking her final exhalation. Sensing that his mother had died, Naruto let out a cry of distress and wailed as though he could bring her spirit back to him through sound alone. "Dispelleris ocularis," she said, and the eye fled. She sat by herself for a few minutes, her eyes full of tears. After sneaking in undetected a few moments earlier and missing his mother's death, Naruto asked, "Grandma, are you okay?" She wiped her eyes and said, "I'll be fine, and why do I get the suspicion you need someplace to hide?" When he heard footsteps, he jumped behind her desk and hid against it, just as a student who had stayed over the break burst in, covered in water and flowers. Can I?" he asked. "Eep. Headmistress, my apologies, I was chasing down a little monster who booby-trapped the hallways," she groaned. Gazing down at the student, Griffin corrected, "You mean you fell for a juvenile prank set up by a small child like a complete amateur?" The student backed out and fled. Naruto laughed and said, Hey, you should have seen the look on her face." Griffin questioned sharply, "What did I say about getting caught?" "But she didn't catch me. I got away," argued Naruto, and Griffin scowled at him. Griffin corrected him, but grinned to himself as he recalled how frequently Caroline had made the same error. Getting caught as in being seen. You do not have to run if they do not know they have to chase you. Saying the word that was essentially the call sign of every child his age, Naruto questioned, "Why?" After giving it some thought, Griffin said, "Tell me, if someone knows you did something but didn't catch you but knows what you look like and where you are, do you think they'll come later to get you back?" Naruto's eyes glowed with comprehension. Naruto smiled, his slightly larger canines displaying, as she said, "Exactly, if they don't know it's you, then nothing bad happens to you. They don't know it's you they need." Griffin was shocked when Naruto began crying and said, "You see, since Thorn saw you, she'll get you back later. I'll stop it if it gets too far, but you have to learn to take what you deserve." "Like the people at Konoha?" he said, taking a small whiff. "No, those bastards take things too far. Over literally nothing. What they did to you will never happen again, and both myself and the teachers here will show you how to make sure it never happens. If you ever do go back, you will learn to do what I can, and more." Griffin made a promise to himself and hugged her tightly. Farragonda wanted to talk to her, so a seagull on her desk flashed blue. She gave it a light tap. Farragonda blinked and fixed her gaze on Naruto after saying, "Good afternoon, Miss Griffin. I hope things are proceeding smoothly in Cloud Tower." She smiled warmly at him and said, "Oh my, I suppose Caroline has returned if her son is present. Handsome little fellow." "No, she passed away in childbirth. I was united with him just this morning," replied Griffin, "and he's already harassed a student." Evenly, Farragonda said, "You're proud," Griffin said calmly. "I am now. What did you call for?" "I was planning to invite both Cloud Tower and Red Fountain to our schools. I had thought to ask you first. I am planning for it to take place a full week after term begins. Your grandson may attend as well, providing he doesn't hassle anyone too much," Farragonda replied with a grin. "Yes, I believe we shall. Cementing relations will make things run so much smoother during the school year, but the old rivalries should stand to encourage our students to greater heights. A more friendly rivalry will be easier to sweep under the carpet," Griffin replied with a nod. Griffin nodded as Farragonda offered, "If you wish, I could contact Saladin so that we may iron out the fill details in cooperation. A few seconds later, a full-body image of Saladin emerged, standing with his cane by his side and a slight hunch. He turned his projection to Naruto and said, "Ah, Lady Farragonda, Mistress Griffin. Good to see you both. To what do I owe this pleasure? And whom is this who resembles Caroline so?" he asked. Raising an eyebrow, he said, "An heir to the legacy on non-magical curses perhaps." And Naruto, who didn't understand half of what he was saying, nodded and smiled, causing a quiet laugh. He scratched at his chin and thought, perhaps I should have my security systems checked again just in case. Farragonda coughed a little to draw attention back to herself. "Anyways, Saladin, I have invited Cloud Tower to the start of term dance," she stated to him. "An excellent proposition. It will most certainly improve our current relations and perhaps prevent our more competitive students from taking the school rivalries too far," Saladin responded with a tone of wisdom. "I hope you don't mind if I bring a few more faculty members than one normally would. Their presence would certainly scare more than a few students into behaving," Griffin said with a few nods. Griffin nodded as Saladin stated, "The timing is rather convenient as there are a few sensitive matters I would like to address with you too." Naruto nodded and literally ran along. Slamming the door behind him, she said, "Naruto, you should go explore around a little more. The sooner you learn the way around the castle the better. Run along." She thought to herself, "He's probably looking for a place to hide." With an eyebrow raised, Farragonda questioned, "He's been there for a quarter of a day and he's already made an enemy?" "Yes, from what I saw it involved a water balloon, a bag of flour and my student Thorn. Needless to say, he did not yet know to make the distinction between not being caught and not being captured. It's rather up in the air for how long he can avoid capture and subsequent punishment." She grinned slightly. "Well, if he gets clever with those spectacles of his, then he could delay it for weeks. But on to more pressing matters." Saladin sighed. "I have consulted the Seeing Circle. The dragon's fire is somewhere on Earth. It has also revealed that the heirs to the 3 witches who destroyed Domino are just starting to come into power, but I could not identify them or their magic specialities." Griffin raised an eyebrow in response to a cry of frustration that reverberated through the hallways. "A disturbing development. At the moment all we can do is guard our individual portions of the Codex. I will watch for any trio of witches with unusual magical potency, and if I can teach them restraint and the value of allies." Farragonda nodded at her companions as she said, "I will keep an eye out for any fire or light-based fairies that cross the threshold of Alphea. It would be best if the dragon fire would stay hidden on Earth, but the odds of that are just plain ridicules." Thorn's cry, "When I get my hands on you, the dragon itself won't be able to bring you back to life," caused others to raise their eyebrows, not just in Cloud Tower but also in Red Fountain and Alphea. "My goodness, staying on subject, I will personally make sure any fire or light-based magician gets surveyed with utmost care. Apart from that, there is little we can do aside from watching and personally preparing for the worst while hoping for the best," Saladin concluded. His image winked out as he said, "Now you should get to your grandson before your student crucifies him." Farragonda said, "He certainly seems to be a handful. I look forwards to seeing you at the dance and meeting him in person. Till then, adieu." Griffin got up right away and walked through half of the castle after the glasses signal. She thought, "He definitely gets about." She commanded, "Abigail, Thorn, Telborn, put my grandson down." Thorn dropped Naruto and stumbled back as she claimed, "I thought we taught self-restraint towards things such as retaliation and where to draw the line." Thorn objected, saying, "Your grandson? He doesn't look anything like you. He resembles his father more as my daughter resembled her father. Now what did he do to cause your earlier outburst?" replied Griffin. Thorn said, He called me a slut, ma'am." Griffin gave Naruto a disbelieving glance. Naruto arched an eyebrow in response to her question, "And where did you learn that word?" Naruto received a disbelieving glance from Thorn and a dejected one from Griffin when he said, "The people at Konoha said Mom was one. I thought it was something good." Naruto nodded as Griffin remarked, "Naruto, the word slut isn't something you should use at all. I won't tell you what it means because you won't understand it. So in total he hit you with both a water balloon and a bag of flour, then called you a slut?" Griffin arched an eyebrow at Naruto, who smiled, as Thorn remarked, "He also kicked me in the shins and led me around half the tower." Thorn brushed a flyaway hair from her face and remarked, "I swear he led me though places I didn't know were here." She had straight brown hair in a tight braid, a tight t-shirt with spines and stylized barbs, dark black jeans, and high-heeled sandals. She was a slender girl with a great figure. "Well, since you two get along so well together, perhaps I should have you share a room," suggested Griffin. Griffin laughed inwardly as they both exclaimed, "What? I think being a grandmother will be a lot of fun." Thorn was becoming suspicious on the second day after Griffin's terrifying grandson appeared. He was able to navigate the tower in ways she was unaware were possible. He was laughing at her, and she could hear it hunting her, stalking her, and waiting for the right moment to ambush her. What he was doing now was beyond her comprehension. It was 2 hours before curious, Naruto said, "Grandma? Are you sure just following her around is a prank?" He was wearing dark blue cargo jeans, a long-sleeved dark green t-shirt, and black shoes with red stripes. Griffin grinned, happy that she had introduced him to psychological warfare, and said, "Trust me, it's called psychological warfare." "Psychological?" inquired Naruto. She tapped the side of Naruto's head and said, "Psychological, it means this." "Oh, I see now, I'm playing a brain trick," Naruto said. "Indeed, if you play with their heads instead, they will become frightened and start to look over their shoulders for a while even if you do nothing else." He smiled back at her. "And when they see you, they'll watch you like a hawk, and if you just smile at them like a little devil, then they get all the more nervous." He remarked, "Where Thorn is." His smile grew as he noticed a tiny golden arrow appear on his glasses. "Thanks for the advice, Grandma. I'll try out P's psychological warfare." Griffin nodded, and Naruto ran away. 5 minutes later, he saw her, peeking around a corner with the light reflecting off his tiny glasses. "What have you been doing?" Thorn glared at him and demanded. Naruto smiled and said, "Nothing." She snickered and stared at him before turning and leaving in a huff. She almost turned the corner when she heard him run and hide close to her so he could continue to watch her. Heh, Naruto said, still observing her. "How are you doing?" She growled. He ran from corner to corner, always close by, but from that point on, he didn't bother looking at her. Instead, he asked his glasses for a place close to her where she couldn't see him, and he ran towards them, laughing a little as he heard her muttering things. "You'll see," Naruto said, and she trembled with anger before calming down and storming off again. He didn't understand half of it, but he took it as a good sign that he was under her skin. Although she couldn't see him, she knew he was nearby and swore, "All right, brat, Lady Griffin's grandson or not, if you keep this up I'm going to hurt you." "However, I haven't taken any action." However, Thorn heard the smirk in Naruto's voice as he said, "Yet," she heard him running and turned to see nothing. "You coward, come out," she cried out to him. "I come from a village of ninjas. I only hit from behind, and when I want to." Naruto's voice echoed through the hallways, making her uneasy. She looked around, becoming paranoid, and noticed a brown spiked vine growing around each arm. The vines grew up and down and would attack on their own initiative. They resembled brown, enormous, Maud Venus fly traps with one yellow eye slit watching for him. "The hiding place closest to her that nothing will catch me or see me going there," he whispered to the glasses. Bringing them directly to his eyes, he noticed an X flashing with a line behind a suit of Naga armor. Then it was a circle, and he ran as quickly as he could behind it. "What is wrong with this child? A ninja who is 3 years old. You two aren't helping," she yelled at them, dispelling them, and they each died and disintegrated. With a scream she turned around, searching for him, but she was panicking and missing him completely. Her panic was translated into the flytraps, who began to whine nervously. When Naruto saw the path directly past Thorn, he whispered to the glasses, "Next hiding place." He waited until she was facing the opposite direction and then hurried across. This as he glanced at the wall and the curtain nearby, then climbed up and leaned over to whisper in her ear as she stammered back to the wall, looking left and right, completely unaware that she had nearly backed up into him. As he released his hold and fell to the ground, she screamed and slapped at him, saying, "Boo," he whispered, "Next hiding place." He saw the path leading up onto the suit of armor's shoulders, and he climbed up. He watched as Thorn looked around the armor, missing him completely, and backed up a little, giving Naruto time to climb down and prepare to run. "I can tell he's still here. Where, though?" She was so paranoid that she muttered. Griffin said, "Naruto, it's lunchtime." Naruto ducked under his armor and left the startled Thorn behind. Lady Griffin. "I've been harassed by that little brat for almost 2 hours. "Really? Did he cause you any harm?" Thorn shook her head in response to Griffin's question. "You were embarrassed then?" she asked, and again a shake of the head. "So you're whining because he just followed you?" "He followed me. He is an assassin and a stalker," Thorn cried out. "Do you have any evidence for this?" Griffin inquired. According to Thorn, "Well, no," Griffin said sharply. "Then stop bothering me." Thorn retreated, and they turned a corner a short while later. "Well done. She's completely terrified and paranoid, and she hasn't used magic at all, not even a basic tool," she said. "I think this is a new record," and Naruto appeared perplexed. "What is application?" did he ask. Use. Naruto nodded, and Griffin remarked, "It means use." "Why does one thing require so many words?" he inquired, and Griffin paused to reflect. "I don't really know," she said. Many people speak many different languages, so I guess that's a large part of it. Naruto crossed his arms slightly and laughed, saying, "Oh, well, it's like someone's trying too hard to me." "In order to give you more than one outfit, Naruto, we are going shopping after lunch," she said. "Alchemically altered clothing is fine, but you should have more than one set." Naruto nodded, unsure of what she meant. After a quiet lunch. Whoa. When Naruto stepped off the bus and looked up to try to see the tops of the buildings, he exclaimed. Naruto snapped his head forward in response to Griffin's remark, "Don't stare, Naruto. It makes people wonder about you." He heard her frown and muttered, "Sorry." He laughed and nervously scratched his neck as Griffin reprimanded him, saying, "Now don't start apologizing when you've done nothing wrong. Don't worry, you're still young. You can learn in your own time that, and being a kid should be the only focus of your life right now." As they came closer and came to a halt in front of a children's clothing store, she said, "Here we are." Griffin soon discovered that Naruto had inherited another characteristic from Caroline. A near-complete disregard for fashion like Caroline. He prioritized comfort over practicality, and once both were satisfied, fashion could be blamed. His taste was soft and baggy, and his favorite colors were black and dark gray with burnt orange lining. The return trip to Cloud Tower went smoothly, and as they were finishing up his belongings, Griffin sat him down. "Naruto, the more you avoid trouble, the better off we'll be together, because I'll be very busy for the next 9 days. To avoid needing those glasses, I want you to become familiar with every inch of Cloud Tower and discover the best hiding spots, all right?" Naruto nodded in response to her question. 2 days later, Griffin discovered Naruto exploring the subterranean passages connecting Cloud Tower to Red Fountain in Alphia. She brought him up when she gave the start of term speech to the students. "Students now have 2 more problems that need to be resolved. In order to keep our rivalry with them amicable and manageable, we have all been invited to the Alphia beginning of term dance." The student body interpreted her words as an unspoken but very real threat. "Secondly, and much more importantly, my grandson Naruto will be living in Cloud Tower." She pointed to him with a sweep of her arm, saying, "Any unprovoked harassment as well as any retaliation taken too far will be punished in ways that will make the destruction of Domino look like a slap on the wrist. I expect that none of you will embarrass me at this event and that my faith in your self-control is not misplaced." When she made her demand, all of the school's teachers were terrified and reacted in unison. "Yes, miss," they all yelled together, completely frightened by her demeanor and reputation. In record time, the hall was cleared after she said, "Dismissed." Naruto, who had been standing slightly to her left during the speech and fidgeting a little, said, "Wow, Grandma, you can be scary when you want to be. I'm grateful. It's a crucial ability to acquire. It stops a great many problems well before they start. You'll learn how to do it when you're older. Now I still have a great deal of paperwork to go through, and the tower changes when it has so many students, so you're going to have a lot more to explore. Now I want you to stay inside the tower though, and not to go into the tunnels or onto the roof." Griffin finally said, "If a door is locked, there's a good reason for it." Naruto nodded after taking a moment to consider what had been said. Griffin grinned and nodded when he said, "Okay, Grandma, if it's locked, I'll stay out." He nodded and ran off when she said, "Now run along, and try not to get in over your head." She sighed and pondered how long it would take for him to grow bored after she yelled and heard him laugh. Though it wasn't a particularly clever plan, she didn't think Naruto was prepared for the kind of retaliation the entire class and teacher would inflict on him. 4 days apparently, she thought as she caught him attempting to pull a practical joke on the entire class. "Naruto, you realize that I won't protect you if you bring it onto yourself, right?" When Griffin asked, he began to perspire. He said, "Oh," and immediately started disarming a crude trap that was impressive for a 3-year-old. "How did you manage to obtain so much raw garbage, though?" Griffin inquired, and Naruto smiled. "I discovered a secret door with a staircase that descended to a foul-smelling pit full of enormous insects. They were too large to fit, but I was still going to lead one in. Thorn might have found it amusing to see it devouring her bed when he entered her room," Naruto said, and after a few moments of staring at him, Griffin burst out laughing, albeit a very restrained and controlled laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. "Now, Naruto, I'll teach you how to read simple script so you can spend your time more effectively. In addition to that, I guess it's time to introduce you to some of the gadgets in this world, namely the television and stereo," she said, and Naruto arched an eyebrow at the words, which he had heard others mention but had never seen. Even though Naruto had developed a heart-stopping habit of jumping from the library section of his room, down 10 feet onto his bed, which was enchanted to self-repair, the first time Griffin saw it, she almost had a heart attack and then spanked him hard. What was particularly unsettling, though, was that even though his butt ended up bright red, he didn't react to the pain at all, which made Griffin think about leveling Konoha for inflicting him so much that he had grown numb to ordinary pain. Subsequently, it was more than a minor inconvenience to get him to wear something suitable for the dance. He ended up looking like Cloud Tower and whoever the hell his father was, probably a ninja, at the same time. He was wearing tuxedo-style pants with a belt buckle engraved with the leaf symbol, and his tiny combat boots were immaculately shined. He was wearing a black jacket and a white t-shirt, and his hair was now silky smooth and shining with a faint hint of red at the back. All of this was accomplished with a single, 5-second application of alchemy on a child in his pajamas and a bedhead. How? Naruto asked as he unexpectedly found himself standing next to his grandmother in the gates of Alphia, with many of the Cloud Tower students and teachers passing by. That. Is a lethal magic able to take you off guard? Knight inquired, and Naruto nodded slowly before leaving, giggling to himself. Alphia had a sense of openness that made him want people to be there rather than just put up with them. Even though he thought the pale pink walls were a little dumb, he followed her in a little nervously, and as they entered the dining area that was transformed into a ballroom, he was wondering why there were so many guys wearing capes and blue and white spandex. The entire place felt different from Cloud Tower, which felt like it was guarding something. Why are they dressed that way, Grandma? Griffin nodded when he said, everyone else dresses differently, but they all dress alike. The uniform is the cause. The cape is a general distraction that becomes a target so most attacks against them will miss, and it's actually reinforced so that it can withstand most normal attacks, Saladin said from behind them, causing Griffin to sigh and Naruto to jump in surprise. She knew the man was a powerful wizard, but when he wasn't dealing with his own students or official business, he had a slight, red huge, mischievous streak. Griffin thought, half amused, half frustrated, he's going to get Naruto as a partner in crime the moment he wanders into Red Fountain through the passages. I'm glad to have met you, boy. Before you ask, a specialist is someone who uses both magic and weapons. My name is Saladin, and I train the specialists. They need all that preparation time for that harsh year, even though they don't learn anything really powerful until year 5. Before then, they are typically too impulsive to be given the reins of enormous power. Griffin arched an eyebrow in response to Saladin's statement. Unless you are a true genius, it takes that long to marry the basics with the arts. He laughed lightly when she said, I see you are as humble as ever. He said, his face perfectly straight and devoid of any hint of humor or deception. You know me, humility personified. Can you teach me how to tell such lies? As Farragonda approached, Griffin smiled and chuckled softly, and Naruto asked, somehow seeing right through him, while Saladin looked at him and laughed. My boy, maybe later. Even though you're still so little, I can tell you have a sharp mind, Saladin remarked. You too. Welcome to Alphia. Farragonda approached them with kindness and said, and it's nice to meet you in person, little one. She smiled at Naruto, who returned the smile. We really have to keep in closer contact. Naruto felt something as he looked around, a pulse of sorts, but slightly different from the one at Cloud Tower. Grandma. Here, too. There's a beat. Similar to the one at home, but a bit quicker. He yelled, and Farragonda and Saladin. Griffin gave him a worried look. I initially believed it to be a straightforward attunement to Cloud Tower, but he's hearing the magic pulse of, by the dragon. He's sensing the Codex pieces, Griffin remarked. Farragonda said, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. The three of them hurried Naruto through the hallways and seated him on a bench right away. Naruto, are you aware that the sound of powers beating is more audible in some places than others? That's because they're coming from something hidden in all 3 of our schools, Griffin said, nodding. It is crucial that you keep it a secret from everyone but Saladin and me, Farragonda. We had to break it and conceal the pieces because it is so strong and dangerous. We don't want to frighten you, Naruto. But some evildoers will harm and even kill to obtain these things. Naruto's eyes widened as Farragonda said, and they'll hurt people who are close to you in order to get you to tell them. That being said, the bad guys won't know you know if you don't discuss it. Do you know? Naruto nodded and his eyes widened as Saladin said that. So, it remains a secret that the 3 of us are concealing something? Farragonda said, it's important that it is. Naruto nodded once more, and she said, perfect, now let's get back before we're missed. Perfect, now let's get back before we're missed. Perfect, now let's get back before we're missed. I'll see if I can have one of the pixies watch over him and help him keep the secret. A lot is riding on his silence. It would be far too easy for the wrong person to realize that he's feeling a pulse of power through his second aura, she thought, and Naruto ran ahead to blend in with the crowd. Before long, all 3 points of magic were alone in the hallway. Saladin grimly stated, we'll have to speak later in greater privacy, without beating around the bush. Both headmistresses nodded, adding, I think it's best to address his second aura as soon as possible. It isn't safe because there is far too much power packed into such a tiny form. I understand as soon as he can grasp the fundamentals. I intend to begin his magical training. Additionally, a scroll containing training and combat techniques for the warriors of his father's homeland was given to me, Griffin said, and Saladin nodded. Would you mind if I taught him some basic sword skills, if that's not too much to ask? When they returned to the ballroom, they saw Naruto laughing with a group of people while the punch bowl was upside down and on his head, its contents soaking him to the bone and spreading all over the floor. At his age, such a thing is cool, and will take up a great deal of time as well as keep him out of trouble, Saladin said, and Griffin nodded gratefully just in time to hear a few screams from fairies and the laughter of the specialists and witches. Naruto, what took place? Griffin inquired, and Naruto gave him a sheepish scratch on the nape of his neck. Faragonda chuckled softly, which made him pout a little. Naruto said, I wanted a drink and no one would help, so I tried to slide it over and slipped and it fell. Naruto was clean and picking himself up off the ground after she waved her hand, filtering all of the punch and returning it to the bowl on the table. When can I learn magic? All I have are these, and everyone else has it, Naruto remarked, prodding his glasses. That's all, Naruto, but I'll teach you a few little tricks. Enjoy yourself while avoiding trouble. We are visitors here, Griffin remarked. Ah, dude. Must I? Naruto asked, but Griffin could tell he was playing and nodded sternly. Please? A single tiny trap? She gave him a glare when he asked, oh no, then I had better dissect that one. Nope. Naruto said with a gleam in his eye, letting everyone know he was joking, but he was talking loudly, and many people began to watch for anything that might be sabotaged. Griffin said, Naruto, I told you to stay out of trouble. Yes, I am. I'm just making it happen, Naruto retorted. Griffin warned, that's the same thing. No, do you see anything concerning, or is it concerning? I wasn't in trouble because it hadn't happened to me. I was just making it. In response, Naruto grinned at his simple reasoning, which caused a few experts to chuckle. I'll need to keep that in mind, a passing witch said with a broad smile. Saladin looked down at Naruto, but he had pulled a disappearing act. By the dragon, he said, feigning frustration so his students wouldn't get any ideas. His eyes, however, snapped up and he looked stern. If I hear any one of you boys using that excuse, I'll be doubling your training load, he threatened, and all the specialists nearby decided that it was uncool to be around there. Faragonda said, oh dear, a mischievous 3-year-old running loose is not a pleasant prospect. The three of them split up to find him, but after a few minutes, Griffin caught him, which was impressive on Naruto's part because he was wearing the glasses that made it easy for her to find him. Sneak peek. It's over, dude, Orochimaru shouted as he stabbed towards Sarutobi's forehead with all three former Hokages barely holding him back. Clang. He was stopped by a wide flat blade, a huge 6-foot claymore with all sorts of bizarre runes down its length. How did you get past the barrier, brat? With both hands on his sword, Orochimaru hissed, attempting to use the 200-pound blade and one trembling arm to overwhelm the boy holding him back. Oh, please. There is nothing on Hellfire with your kitty barrier, Naruto smiled in response. In any case, you will pass away alongside the elderly man, Orochimaru assertively remarked. You're outnumbered 2-1, and your arm is giving way, as he gradually pushed the boy with the red and blonde hair back a little. There are 3 issues with that, FFFT. First, I'm right-handed, he said, using his right arm to brace the massive blade and instantly stopping Orochimaru. Secondly, I've faced and destroyed armies before. Odds are nothing. He smirked and smiled cheekily at the Anbu who were still trapped outside the barrier. 3. I'm better than you, Naruto said calmly as he used all of his strength to push Orochimaru back, leaving behind an afterimage as he cleaved overhead, then tore through 3 feet of roof tiles, then Orochimaru's left leg and arm in one ruthless and blinding motion. Naruto blew a piercing whistle as he swung his sword over his shoulders, but it looked over as soon as it started. Orochimaru's mouth opened up and he threw up a perfectly healthy version of himself, and the Kusanagi flew backwards and into his waiting hand as he brushed his slime-covered hair out of his eyes. Damn. That's another matter, the fun had just begun. Let's see how many times you can pull that off, he said excitedly as he cracked his neck and Orochimaru assumed a ready stance. He was humming to himself as he finished his latest creation, a small farewell gift to Thorn and retribution for that nasty cut on his right knee. It had been a lot of work to tag those giant roach spiders, but he now had a dozen ready to summon if any magic was used near the seal he had just finished, which was hidden under Thorn's bed, and it was her last night here. He smiled fondly as he recalled the amount of damage he had done to her thus far and how vicious her retaliations were. They always took the war to a new level whenever they could. Naruto would tar and feather her as she entered a packed classroom, and she would give him a wedgie with an entire tree during lunch for the entire school to see. The thought of it gave him phantom pains. But this was the cherry on top. Naruto had finally mastered some basic runic magic, which was not supposed to be used for transporting living things, but no one would miss those spiders. He knew that they were likely to die and that only fragments of them would be called forth, but hey, what a way to surprise her. He slipped out of her room and ran down the library's halls to a small hidey hole where he kept one of the walking eyes tied up for his own use. Inveros ocularis, Naruto ordered, and he could see his hideaway from above in the orb. In order to move the viewpoint, he gently prodded the orb and rolled it inside the eyelid. After a minute or so, he found himself in the hallway outside Thorn's room. He wasn't going to move the viewpoint inside because that would activate the seal, but he failed to notice that Thorn had picked up on the scrying and was tracking it back to him. "I've got you a little shit," Thorn shouted as she dragged him with a barbed vine out of his haven. Naruto wasted no time and slipped a three-pronged kunai out of his pocket and sliced the living cord, but to no avail, and he was quickly hog-tied and being held up, gnawing at the vine and futilely trying to saw through it. "Alright Tiny, what did you do to my room this time?" Thorn demanded, shaking him violently. Naruto started looking a little green and his cheeks bulged a bit. "Oh hell no." In about 2.5 seconds, Naruto hit the ground, pocketed the kunai, and immediately dodged away from her and behind a shelf after she half yelled, dropping and entangling him in a bare moment. As Thorn turned the corner and began to hunt him, he took control of his breathing and climbed up on top of the shelf, slipped off his badly tied shoes. He was still learning how to do that correctly, tucked them under his left arm, and sprinted forward and down the bookshelf on the far side of the searching Thorn and landed with hardly a sound. Have to hide, he thought, and he bit into his shoelaces to hold them and slid across his legs, pumping, and slid on his knees under a desk just in time to prevent Thorn from spotting him as she came out running. Naruto used this to dash to one that was almost at the archway, and as she checked another desk, he dashed out and down the hall. He made good time, then climbed up into a windowsill and ran straight up until he grabbed the curtain, his arms and legs really getting a workout, climbed up, and he moved slowly behind the curtain 10 feet off the ground. "Phew," he said, holding his right hand over his chest, and he waited for 3 full minutes, his arms burning, but he almost sighed with relief as he heard Thorn rush past, almost baying for his blood. Better go before she doubles back, he thought, and he ran to the wall across from him and tapped on the stones until he found one that sounded a little different. He pushed it in, and the entire wall followed, splitting in two, and he squeezed in through the crack and pushed the stone out from the inside to seal it up again. As he reached the other door, Naruto thought to himself, that in its way too short to connect to hallways on opposite parts of the tower. He hurried down the dark hallway, using only his glasses to guide him through their night vision. What always gets me is that without going up or down or having any magic used, this hallway connects 2 other hallways 3 floors apart. He pushed the stone on the wall to open it, squeezed through, and closed it behind him. She still couldn't move as quickly as I could as he entered his room and slid the bar across the bottom of it just in case, he said. The wall halls don't make much sense, but they always get you there fast. I've never, ever hidden from her in my room, so she'll never ever look here. He crawled onto his bed to just relax, sighed, and looked up. Oh man. As he noticed Thorn casually leaning over the railing and raising an eyebrow at him, he exclaimed. What exactly are you attempting to do? She said, tell me and you get away scot-free, and Naruto smiled without detecting any deception. Under your bed is a summoning glyph. 12 of those enormous cockroach spiders in the trash area are attached to the pillow area. Since it's only in chalk, a quick wipe will take care of it, but any magic will set it off because it's so sensitive. Thorn nodded and leapt down, landing next to him, sending him flying upwards, where she caught him. Well, I'm going to force you to clean it before using some power because, to be honest, as she ascended the stairs to her room, Thorn said calmly, you know the only reason I'm not throwing you out a window for this is because you kept this place interesting. I don't trust you, she said, and Naruto laughed. Their rivalry was well known due to their increasingly intense prank and vengeance war. Thorn fainted as Naruto answered, that and if you did that grandma would turn you into a slug and feed you to a toad. Thorn threatened as she pushed Naruto beneath the bed, and he quickly removed the seal. That too, she said, and Naruto laughed. Okay, monkey boy, if I see anything start to trash my room, it'll be you they start trashing. All right, it's finished, may I leave now? Naruto crawled out and asked. After a minute of waiting with no result, Thorn said, flare your mana then yay. Naruto focused for a moment, and then a massive surge of power pulsed outward, mostly red but appearing to be tied up with blue energy. Alright, now get out, she said, carrying him to the hallway and dropping him on his butt before slamming the door. When he heard some very girly and extremely freaked out screams, Naruto said, yeah, I'm bored. He took out a slip of paper and a pencil and quickly recreated the seal, folded it into a paper airplane, went to the central staircase, and threw it without carrying it where it landed. He then sat down and relaxed on a bench and laughed. How is your work going, ya? Knight chuckled as he asked, peering over the railing. Naruto was accustomed to his unexpected appearance and wasn't even startled by it. Hyu got lucky. Z roaches veer all summoned alive. Hyu no dis voon is only so powerful because Z girls are all afraid, he said, though they're too busy scrambling. Zay could easily squash them. There will be a lot of tasty dreams tonight. Naruto made the decision to scale the railing and observe from above, his feet kicking a few inches off the ground. You intended to ruin my room like that? As Thorn walked up behind them, he said, Whoa, glad I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't want to see you even try to top that. Naruto laughed as he watched them, and Teacher E was just laughing at the sight of this. Having slightly altered her aura to ward off the 10-foot bugs, one witch became wise and used a sonic scream to crush one, only to get splattered with its goopy purple innards. Can you guess how long it will take them to get them all? 10 minutes, I say, Naruto said with a smile. As one of the girls actually passed out, Knight smiled and said, Zevon. Thorn leaned against the railing and chuckled a few times at the younger girl's misfortune before concluding, 12, it's a second-year class. 9 minutes later, the final roach was dealt with by being thrown in the empty space that would drop the thing about 70 floors down and into the entranceway. 10 seconds later, there was a crunch and a few screams coming from below. When Naruto realized he was closest, he grumbled, Nuts shoulda made a bet. Thorn slapped Knight in the back of the head after he laughed and said, Vel as they say, seeing your rear is always clear. You dumb Alp. Its hindsight is very evident. How on earth did you land a teaching position? Thorn insisted. Knight held his chin and smiled, boasting, Zat would be my dossing good looks. Thorn laughed as Naruto said, In other words, Grandma felt bad for you. Knight gave him a betrayed look. You're dead to rights there with him, she cried out. HMPH. It's obvious that your children don't understand what true beauty is. I'll be leaving you now. Hi. He transformed into a miniature gargoyle and landed on the railing before diving, but he had to avoid a loogie of dark blue, nearly black fire, as Knight said. Naruto muttered, Missed. Damn. Then, a scream could be heard far below. Who had I hit? Don't care, he shrugged after wondering. Time to play with fire, he said, adding that it had become a little routine for him to practice using his hellfire for a couple of hours every day. It had begun a few days after his 5th birthday, which was somehow on the day of the rose, which was the realm of Magix's versions of Mother's Day. He had been caught trying to slip a skin-absorbed laxative into her sheets so that she would crap the bed, and he was being held up by his ankles by an unflattering vine that kept snapping at him. He felt pressure build up between his eyes, and he yelled, causing the thing to burn to a crisp in an instant, but he was knocked out and fell 2 feet onto a stone floor head first. As he walked at his own pace to one of the gyms, he yawned casually, figuring that if it wasn't already empty, he would use who was in as target practice. In Cloud Tower, one had to mature quickly. There wasn't much room for coddling. Sure, if he was truly in pain or trouble, he would get more than enough slack and comfort to pick himself up, but otherwise, they weren't giving him much leeway. Despite this, he was actively encouraged to be as cunning, and downright nasty as possible. He could, of course, but he usually had to up the ante more than anything else. As Naruto entered the large room, he said, Empty, nuts, no target practice. If this place wasn't self-repairing, I'd bet it'd be nothing but scorch marks left, right, and center. He muttered as he summoned a handful of dark blue fire with crimson veins and through it he smiled before choosing to try the spell he had created. Vulpes Vulpus Flamma. He chanted, Fox Flame, and a spiral of his dark fire emerged, forming a 5-foot-tall, 2-tailed fox out of fire. It ran forwards before exploding with enough force to almost send Naruto shooting backwards. Yes, I believe it to be sufficiently strong, as the charred and broken pieces of the stands flew back together and the charcoal turned back to the polished oak and stone. He panted while lying on his back. I've been working on a signature attack for months, and it's finally cool enough and strong enough, he said. Perhaps I need some protection now? After thinking for a minute, he said aloud, I'll ask Grandma, she'll know. He then sprinted to her office as quickly as he could, avoiding anyone in his path and almost running into a few. Hey Grandma, Kenny, how to fly? Can you tell me? With lightning speed, Naruto hurried in and asked. At this significant change in pace, Griffin blinked. Naruto, I'm in a conference right now with Farragonda and Saladin. Could you please return in about half an hour? Naruto scratched his head in response to her question. That's 30 minutes, correct? He asked and she nodded. K, I'll see you then. It took me 3 minutes to get to my room, which is normally 10 minutes away by foot, he said as he hurried out. He went straight to the stereo next to his dresser and hit play, and instantly a ton of techno music erupted from the speakers, which were quickly recognized as Waka Laka, the extended version. I don't own that either. One of the places in Cloud Tower that Naruto was completely certain of was that it was his and his alone. Even his grandmother had asked permission before entering. He was free to play any music he wanted, loud as he pleased, and the only things he was prohibited from doing were dangerous ones, which he had vowed not to do so that he could really just cut back and unwind in the room. Seeing that it was 3:20 in the afternoon, he hurried up the stairs to a small study desk with a large, comfortable chair, and sat down. He unrolled the scroll he had received from Konoha, and since most of his memories of an elderly man who resembled a grandpa were fading, he decided he should visit sooner rather than later to ensure he doesn't forget. He discovered that applying a small amount of blood to a particular area caused another scroll to emerge. The final one contained instructions that were far above his head and all three-pronged kunai. Let's see the last one then, he thought, assuming that he had previously gotten it backwards and had opened the last one first. He was correct. Chakra Fundamentals? The Ninja's Beginner's Guide? You and kunai? What the devil are assassin self-help books? Well, this could be cool, he said aloud. I suppose ninjas are like unbeatable shadow warriors, right? You can only be certain of their presence if they have already stabbed you. Amazing. He shouted, and he hurled himself over the railing and landed on his butt on the bed and bounced to the edge in a seating position. All right. A perfect 10. He exclaimed with delight. Hun? When he noticed that his grandmother wasn't knocking on his door to talk to him, he asked, wow, she really is busy. Okay, so what's this chakra stuff? He thought as he opened the book he brought down and began reading. It was clearly written for someone a little older than him, if not the same age, and he didn't even notice the song ending and the silence falling as he devoured the material. After about 50 pages, he sat up and tried meditating to feel his chakra, and he got a huge amount. It felt a little like his mana, but different. Whereas his mana was a blazing inferno that warmed him up and set his mind afire, the chakra felt like smoke and electricity all around him, but it gave him a tingling feeling. Wow, 2 types of power. A knock on the door interrupted him as he picked it up again. Awesome, he said giddily. Now what can I use this stuff for? Naruto? Are you being held up by something? Griffin inquired, and that's when he realized the time. Oh no, I apologize. Grandma, I got sucked into those chakra books, Naruto yelled as he hurried to the door, nearly tripping over his laces. That's okay, and it's good that you're spending your time in a useful way. Incidentally, there was an outbreak of spider roaches at classroom 486, and it had your fingerprints all over it, which had a suspicious lack of evidence towards anyone, Griffin said, and Naruto scratched the back of his head. Do you think I should make a mark? Naruto asked somewhat guiltily. I mean, mine is that it can't be traced back to me, except by you, Grandma. Actually, I'd like to congratulate you on a job well done. That prank has given a few teachers ideas on how to instruct students to be passively aware of their surroundings so that they may not be caught off guard. Griffin laughed. Well, regards? Anyway, Grandma, I finished it, Naruto said, perplexed by the word passively and unsure if he was receiving a reprimand. He dismissed it. A large, strong, Hellfire fox, however. I believe I should now get something to protect me. Griffin grinned and nodded as Naruto explained. I was thinking maybe you could help me since it took months to get the fox flame working and a lot of witches can fly, so I was wondering if you could teach me how. I don't think all fights will end with one attack unless they're really weak or I catch them off guard. He inquired, and Griffin grinned. Can I enter? The thing about Naruto is that many personal things, like flying, are done in unique ways even though they're very common among magic users, she said, and Naruto went out of her way to let her in. Griffin clarified, and Naruto gave it some serious thought. For example, I use invisible spirits to carry myself, while your friend Thorn prefers not to fly at all, but when she does, she creates wing-like plants that allow her to move at great speeds. Unfortunately, her finesse is lacking, so she doesn't dare use it in tight spaces. All right, then how is it possible to fly with fire? Naruto asked thoughtfully. I can get off my head in 2 different ways. One is that you can quickly fly through the air by setting off tiny explosions beneath your feet, though this can be risky. The alternative is to summon fire beneath your feet so that you can run, walk, and stand in the air to move quickly and controllably. You can also encircle your entire body with fire. However, instead of regular fire, you have hellfire, which is extremely risky and could burn you. Make me a promise that you will exercise extreme caution. Naruto, are you able to do that? She asked, and after giving her a brief glance, Naruto nodded. She grinned as he nodded and said, if it's too hot, I'll stop. You have so much of your mother in you, she said, ruffling his hair before letting out a sigh. Good boy. Griffin remarked. It eases the pain of knowing she's gone. With a hint of shyness, Naruto said, I never knew mommy, you're the only mommy I have, grandma. He was immediately embraced. I'm grateful you're out of trouble now, she said, you can cause it, but don't get in it, and Naruto grinned broadly at her. Naruto's 3-year-old epiphany had essentially become his motto ever since, much to the horror and dismay of many new students who were his favorite victims. He was notorious for completely embarrassing and frightening people with bloody layered traps. If you escaped one, you were led straight into a worse one, and if you managed to get past them all, Naruto would drill you on exactly how you did it and wouldn't bother you until he figured out what he did wrong. Most people told him to shut up and leave, but he was becoming frighteningly skilled at trapping people, as 3 witches who had to change all their clothes before they even reached their dorm rooms at the beginning of the year could attest. I'll be in my office now if you need me, but don't forget to knock the next time, she said. There are a lot of dangerous things in there, and Naruto nodded before finding himself alone once more. All right, blow things up beneath me. Sounds simple, he said, focusing a lot of force just beneath his heels. A few seconds later, he exclaimed, Yay-oh, ouch. The door flew open, revealing his grandmother. Wide-eyed with concern, he screamed as the hellfire flash fried the bottoms of his feet and burned through his shoes without even melting them. He panted in agony for a minute. Naruto. What took place? As she performed a swift healing spell that relieved his pain and lessened the swelling and burns to a nasty sunburn and a slightly sore pair of feet, she demanded. The fire is too hot, but I tried flying. Without even melting my shoes, it passed right through them. As she lifted him and gently placed him in bed, he cried out. Well, she commanded Naruto to conjure a ball of flame, and a moment later, a baseball-sized, dark blue fireball was hovering 2 inches or more above his outstretched hand. As the information came in, she closed her eyes and uttered the words, Estendo sum vestri specialis. Disclose your secrets. That's it, your hellfire is as frigid as it gets. Naruto, at your age, learning spells that are outside of your natural element will take a long time, and it can only be used for attacks. On the plus side, your power will severely burn even creatures that are typically impervious to fire attacks. Thus, Griffin said sadly, I'm afraid you may never be able to fly. What? However, but how do fairies do it? Perhaps. Grasping at straws, Naruto asked. They power up to gain wings. Wizards, witches, and warlocks never turn off, but they also never turn on. Thus, sorry, no wings for you. Naruto sighed and pouted a little. Hey, don't give up. Maybe those Chakra, or is it Chinka? She said you may find those books and scrolls useful. When she said, it'll probably more than compensate for flying, Naruto's face brightened. All right, then, I had better get on with it. As she handed him the books by the foot of the bed, he cheered and Griffin laughed. Now stay in here. I want you off your feet as much as possible. She gave him an order, and Naruto nodded. Now for the rest of the day, don't cause trouble, she said, placing her hand on his shoulder and using alchemy to transform him into fox-patterned pajamas. Naruto pouted and got a laugh, saying, damn it, no fun for me. A few moments later, he was by himself in his bed. Just stay in bed, scamp, she said, laughing lightly as he stuck his tongue out at her. All right. Then where had I gone? Am I able to adhere objects to my skin using basic chakra practice? Cool, perhaps I could use this to stand upside down on roofs or something, or I could attach myself to heavy objects. He asked. Reading through about 10 minutes later, he thought he had an idea about what to do. He took the Kanai and U book and put his hand on the center of the cover so it couldn't reach the edge and focused. It was hard for him to pull his mana away, but after a minute he had a good chunk of chakra in his palm and fingertips and he lifted. Oh, that's so cool. A thought occurred to him about an hour later, so he jumped back into the book and tested it by crawling out of his blankets and pressing his hand against the wall with as much chakra as he could. He was happy to know the difference between chakra and mana so he could separate them, and he grinned broadly when he guessed it stuck. When he thought of all the new dimensions he could add to his pranks and escape routes with this, he laughed and lost his grip, fortunately falling on the bed. He then slowly but surely began to grasp the grasp of wall crawling. Then above his bed he nervously stood up while upside down and after a few moments started to take a few steps. Then the door opened and Griffin with a tray of food was revealed. Naruto. You can defy physics without magic, but for now, your feet need to heal, so I really meant it when I told you to stay in bed. Griffin uttered those words, and Naruto descended to his bed. I apologize, sheepishly, he said when he was back under the covers. She laid his supper across his lap and said, anyway, I have your supper here. He eagerly devoured the food, saying, that was an interesting trick you were using, was it that? Ah, Chakra? At the office? Griffin asked, and Naruto nodded. Well, you can start working on it tomorrow. But don't give me that look, Young man, if you leave the bed for any reason outside the bathroom, I'll find out. Griffin ordered Naruto to stay in bed today, and he nodded grudgingly before finishing with a small pout. Griffin pouted even harder after she said, "You can't guilt me, you know that." Griffin promised, "I'll be watching." Naruto responded, drawing a snort from his grandmother, "Never hurts to try." Griffin said, "Just remember I can see you at any time." Naruto nodded and sighed, and she kissed him on the forehead before removing the tray. "You get better now." "Oh no. Grandma. For what purpose was that?" As Griffin walked away laughing to herself, Naruto asked, wiping at his forehead. "I hope it doesn't leave a mark. No one would ever let me forget it." Naruto sighed and picked up his book on chakra once more, still massaging the area where he had been kissed. To himself he murmured, "All right, there are elemental types of chakra, but this book does not contain them. There are nuts called tenkatsu? Tenketsu? Tenketsu points can be attacked to stop the chakra's flow, and the Juken is a fighting style built around them. It sounds weak. Even if my Tenkusto or anything else is blocked, I will still use hellfire to burn them black because there is so much more out there than chakra without using some. I don't think they can stop mana," he thought, then boredly spat a little hellfire out of his mouth. He sighed, "I hate being stuck in one spot." He collapsed back onto his pillows and gazed at the ceiling, fully aware that his grandmother was constantly watching him. Chakra and mana. Two kinds of power, are they able to mix? Yes. That would be awesome. Perhaps I could combine them, he thought excitedly, and he tried it right away, trying to put an even amount of chakra and mana into the same spot. The end result was a light blue and orange fire that danced in the palm of his hand. Perhaps, he said, reaching up and using the fire to pull himself up. Naruto. Remain in bed. Griffin's voice shattered, and Naruto released his grip and retreated into the blankets. He gasped a little, as combining mana and chakra required a lot of energy, and then he leaned back when he heard the power pulse he had been accustomed to hearing for a long time. And Grandma talks about 3 witches like they're the worst people imaginable. What makes them worse from others? And which 3 are the bad ones? He thought before darkness overcame him and he was fast asleep. He thought, that power is from something called the Codex. It's supposed to be so strong that even in 4 pieces it's supposed to be a wasteland. He remembered all the times he eavesdropped on his grandmother, on a planet called Earth. Something or someone holding something called the Dragonfire is hidden. I wonder if Dragonfire is like my Hellfire? He shrugged mentally, not really noticing that his body was dropping off to sleep. Half the fun is hearing the new girls scream when they brush against the roses, Naruto said, wandering around and haphazardly sniffing the roses that adorned Cloud Tower while also observing the long trains of thorny vines that threatened to skin your arms if you swung them too widely. The looks I receive without even having to earn them are nothing more than a little fear, and I am truly innocent. Several of the first-year witches around Naruto were incensed when he said, "Ah, bliss," in a lighthearted manner. It seems like nobody here gets along with their mothers. Well, the Rose Day, the Day of the Rose, was always awkward at Cloud Tower, he muttered aloud. You could count on one hand the number of witches who got along well with their mothers, and the majority of the students were at odds with their entire family. The 3 schools of magic's main goal was to teach and train the 3 types of magic users without the use of traditional tutoring. Wizards had masters and apprentices, warlocks had cabals, and so on. Since so many students went on to become teachers, the entire process had to be completed in one sitting, and Naruto was not permitted to play practical jokes on new teachers during the 6-month leniency period. There was essentially no planning involved. Either Naruto or Griffin would come up with something and carry it out, or something would just come up and they would roll with it. So it's a break day. He muttered boredly, "Where are all of you going?" He was at the entrance level, which was floor 50, when a sizable group of witches departed with a purpose. As she went by, one of them said, "Big race in magics, apparently it's gonna be an annual thing now." Naruto had found something to do, so he ran up a nearby wall, used his chakra to launch himself into the air, and used that to jump up the massive central spiral staircase and up the center of it. Although it was frequently used for flying students, Naruto wasn't going to let that stop him. He preferred to go in blasting with extreme force and prejudice, and once he pulsed so much into his chakra into the stone that he cracked the wall and launched himself off. Despite this, he learned how to perform chakra jumps off that. The 3 witches were the reincarnations of 3 witches who spearheaded the destruction of Domino while trying to steal the dragon's fire, but were thwarted by both the royal family and the 3 points of magic, including his grandmother who had initially been on their side. He arrived at her office door rather quickly and decided to knock. He had interrupted a lot of things in the past and learned quite a bit from them, but it was dangerous knowledge. The Codex and the Dragon's Fire were both enormous power sources and amplifiers that, in the wrong hands, would spell disastor, according to what Naruto had learned, and the dragon's fire was in the form of a girl's magic. Where did these etiquette originate? He jumped and let out a startled cry when Griffin said, "I'm sure I didn't teach you many." "Oh no. How come you're always behind me? How do you continue to conceal your chakra and mana?" Holding his heart and panting, Naruto demanded. "Your books on chakra have been lying around. They're a pretty interesting read because chakra can both amplify mana and emit its own special pulse of power," Griffin remarked. "For me, suppressing it goes hand in hand with possessing it." Griffin grinned at the expression Naruto gave her. This child was rarely caught off guard, so it was amusing when he was. "Anyway, I thought we could go watch the race in magics today." After learning about it, Griffin raised an eyebrow as Naruto explained. "Maybe mess with a few heads while there, rig the race, and make a killing at the bets." Naruto furrowed his brow as Griffin said, "You do realize the race is for charity. It's difficult to have fun during the day without causing trouble. Perhaps we could incorporate something?" Griffin nodded in response to Naruto's question. "Yes, in fact I had the idea that we could go to Konoha and start a fight. Before we begin, I'm sure you noticed that your hair has been turning red at the roots and that your whisker marks have disappeared, right? Lay a rose on your mother's grave," she said, winding down a bit, and Naruto nodded solemnly. "That's because you had a second soul inside of you for a long time," she said, and Naruto nodded. This soul was extremely strong and malevolent, but it was so tightly imprisoned that when you began to use its power. Hellfire. Yes, the beast is the source of your hellfire, but now you have equal access to its power transformed into mana and chakra. It has stimulated more of your mother's blood and accelerated your natural healing to the point of regeneration," Griffin explained. "So without it around, the whisker marks are gone, and your hair is turning red with your mother's blood." Naruto's eyes widened. "So, what kind of mana did I initially have?" Curious, Naruto asked. "I'm not sure, but it seems to strengthen your hellfire, so it could be one of a number of things," Griffin listed, and Naruto pondered. "Plants, wind, oil, or even regular fire or a natural hellfire despite its rarity. So I have two of each in place of mana and chakra. How can I disassemble them?" When Naruto asked, Griffin gave him a soft smile. "How does it feel, Naruto, to use your magic?" Griffin inquired, and Naruto pondered. "Like I'm pulling huge power from inside myself. It's a rush of energy and a heat that moves through me like fluid fire. Same for my chakra," Naruto thought. Naruto scowled in contemplation before following her instructions. "Your natural mana should feel like it's always been there and you're not pulling it too hard. Let it flow gently." For a while, Naruto appeared to be slowly dancing while constipated. This entertainment lasted for roughly 5 minutes before Naruto HMMD, "Something wrong?" "Yes, even though I can't touch it, I can sense my natural mana." Griffin gave a wise nod as Naruto explained. "I think I can grab my natural chakra too. It feels more cool and fast, very fast, and it moves real easy too. Instead of the demonic chakra you've been using all along, I believe your natural chakra is wind-based. In any case, you start practicing with your natural chakra," Griffin explained, and Naruto nodded. "It should be much less powerful but much easier to control. It should come as no surprise that you are unable to use your natural mana at this time, as most people cannot use mana until they are around 16. Naruto objected, "But I can use mana," and was given a finger flick to the forehead. "Pay closer attention. You haven't used your natural mana yet. You've been using the demon's mana though and its chakra. But you have to learn to use your own power. The only reason you've gotten away with so many magic-based pranks all these years was because only a handful of students believe that it's even possible for you to use mana. Stick to learning chakra right now. You have 2 sources of it, so that's twice as much work," he grumbled. Griffin remarked. "But it's more than twice the payback for the work. If you have options you can keep going no matter what. Now we leave in a few hours. Get some practice in." Naruto gave her a full 180-degree turn and was beaming foxily at her. Even though he was out of sight in a short amount of time, he yelled, "All right, I'm on it," and ran off, using a mostly demonic chakra but also incorporating more of his natural chakra by the second. After 3 hours in anticipation of a negative response, Griffin inquired, "So have you actually gotten something down yet?" She gave him a look when Naruto boasted, "Yay, actually I did. Well, I already know how to move my chakra around and force it out, and I got to thinking, since I can spit hellfire, why not wind? So I spin my natural chakra in my mouth in a circle, then spit out the whole thing. It keeps going until it runs out of power or hits something, and when it hits something, whoosh. Huge blast of wind. And if someone's got me pinned they only think it's a little spit, then whoosh, I send them for a hard flight." Naruto went on to explain that Griffin had developed the phrase hard flight. It resulted from his attempts to combine mana and chakra in order to fly. The control was terrible, and he was flung about like a pinball without any protection. He was mercifully knocked out when his mana and chakra went crazy, stopping the flow and dropping him. Madame Cross, the new nurse, had caught him after 20 stories and taken him to the hospital. He had complained that the flight was difficult and that it became stuck. With a nod, Naruto began the incantation to break through dimensional barriers. Well, I'm sure you can have some fun with it while we're at Konoha, and remember Konoha wasn't always kind to you. I know you don't remember any of it but the Hokage, but he was one of the few people that treated you like a human. In a city of thousands you will have few friends there. Do not get caught. Grandma turned to see Naruto holding a single red rose in full bloom with the thorns cut off. Grandma? Before we go, I got you this? Naruto blushed a little as he gave it to her and was embraced. After all, you're the only mother I have, he said. Naruto nodded solemnly as Griffin said, thank you. Now let's lay one at Caroline's grave. He held her waist tightly while she chanted, and in a flash of green light, they vanished. The Konoha. When they reached an alleyway that was barely visible, Naruto exclaimed, wow, that was cool. Can you teach me that? When you're older, but it seems we have arrived during a party, Griffin said. After a blast of darkness and a blast of hellfire, a wizened voice behind them said, yes, the Kyuubi festival, in celebration of the day Naruto's father defeated the beast. A portion of the alleyway was partially melted but still clear now behind them. Sarutobi remarked, well, that was just plain rude. Naruto, I see you take after your grandmother. Griffin said, gradually realizing, how did you find us so quickly? With mana it's no real challenge, but by the dragon you're a sorcerer. Sarutobi shook his head and smiled. Architect, I create magical items, but I was never very good, more of a hobbyist than anything. Jutsus and strategy were always my area of expertise, Sarutobi acknowledged. Unaware that he was referring to the vaguely familiar Hokage by his old nickname, Naruto asked, so why not sell them? Use them to make yourself rich, old man. The Hokage gave him a kind smile. Sarutobi calmly said, this world, my children and grandchildren included, aren't ready for what I stumbled upon. Mana is too powerful for these people. I could unleash the ley lines and bathe this world in power, but if such a thing was done, civilization would rip itself apart. War, famine, pestilence, and genocide would become commonplace, and I'd rather not see that happen. I've long sealed it to release it slowly instead of a large barrage. The only way to unleash it all at once require either a literal unlimited amount of chakra or an archmage's level of mana. Sarutobi said calmly, and Griffin grinned. Too often in history, entire worlds were brought to ruin by a sudden influx of magic, and too often the wrong people got hold of it first and used everything to crush everyone else until war broke out literally everywhere. Even though horror stories about the sudden appearance of magic were still being told millennia ago, it had happened on Gaia, the supercontinent of magics, which had its capital. Sarutobi shook his head in response to Naruto's question, old man, were you born in magics? It would be easier to say I stumbled into it and was lost for a week until I met my master. She taught me everything, and by the time I found my way home I was a fully fledged architect. Sarutobi acknowledged. He said without seeming to boast, I'd even wager it would take all three of the former cages to so much as hold me back nowadays, and they'd have to be in their prime. Not like that could happen though. Interesting. I suppose that's how you sensed my use of magic all those years ago and knew to bring the scroll with you, Griffin thought. Sarutobi said softly, anyway, I'm not sure why your two are here, but it's good to see you anyway. He then disappeared in a whirl of leaves. Griffin and Naruto nodded when he said, well, now that we have the locals' blessing, let's go. It didn't take Griffin long to locate the graveyard, and they approached the headstone before Naruto placed a single dethorned rose on the grave. He said softly, hey mom. He was at a loss for words. Dude, this is really awkward. Even though she was trying to control her tears, Griffin smiled and said, hello Caroline, it's been far too long. I'm sorry we couldn't make amends before your passing, but I'm sure you'll be glad to know that I'm taking good care of your son and he has all of your spirit, and more. As Naruto consoled her, she shed a few tears and said, I miss you so much, my little girl. Perhaps if I'd been there more, or tried to understand you better, you wouldn't have run away and lost your life. She wiped her eyes and said, then again. Naruto gave her a tighter hug after Griffin said, if you hadn't I would not have been made a grandmother to such an interesting child. You can rest peacefully knowing that I fully intend to help him live a long and good life. She directed some of her mana toward the rose that Naruto had placed on the ground, and it started to grow into a small bed of roses over Caroline's grave. Griffin began to lead Naruto away, who promptly bowed to the grave as they departed, saying, now let's go Naruto. I'm sure your mother wouldn't want us weeping over her grave and getting a cold. She loved life far too much for something like that. Naruto jumped at the sound of Sarutobi's words. If I may, Lady Griffin, there are a few things I'd like to discuss with you. As both adults grinned in amusement, Naruto gasped, what the hell? I know Grandma can sneak up on me, but you too? Good grief? Griffin sighed as Sarutobi remarked, so milady, can you trust Naruto to stay out of trouble while we speak of certain significant events pertaining to him? As Naruto gave Sarutobi the peace sign, Griffin remarked somewhat ruefully, he won't get in trouble but he's liable to cause a riot. Sarutobi exhaled from his pipe and remarked, well that's alright then, the Anbu have been sloppy lately, they could use some exercise. Sarutobi nodded as Griffin remarked, I assume this business relates to the beast within him? Griffin nodded and turned to face Naruto after Sarutobi said, yes, but it would be best if we spoke in privacy or else the wrong people might overhear us. She told him sternly, stick to your creed like glue. Naruto nodded. She smiled as she said, I'll pick you up when I'm done with the old man. Naruto nodded. Griffin said, now stay out of trouble, but make sure to create a good deal of it. She nodded to Sarutobi, who gave Naruto a kind smile before the two disappeared in a whirl of leaves. Well, there's a party in town. No one knows about Mana around here, and I'll be gone in a few hours. Holy crap, this is gonna be the best birthday ever. Pranks all around, yeehaw. He screamed with joy at Konoha. After dozens of Anbu discovered their masks glued to their faces, 500 paint bombs of various colors transformed the Uchiha district into a hippie paradise, and Tora the Hellcat made its way into the Inazaka kennels. Naruto stopped for a bite to eat. He stole some cash from a stiff-looking man with lavender eyes, enough to feed 4 starving Akamichi and have leftovers. He had discovered a pleasant ramen stand with 2 gentle souls who instantly removed themselves from Naruto's ever-expanding shit list. Naruto laughed when Tucci said, nice to see someone who appreciates ramen the right way, although you don't seem to be comfortable with chopsticks. Tucci and Ayame nodded when Naruto remarked, well, I haven't used them before so yay, I'm clumsy with them. I've lived most of my life with my grandma at a school she runs. Ayame inquired, so what kind of school is it? Naruto sent out a mana probe after she joked, think I can get enrolled? No sorry, you see a certain something is needed for any of the coursework to be learned and you don't have it. The ability to use magic is kinda required in a school for witches. Naruto responded with a scowl. Tucci chose to stand aside and watch the show after Ayame remarked, that's no way to refer to girls, young man, it's very bad manners. Naruto waved his hands in front of him and trailed black flames from them as he said, no, I mean literally. Turn you to a toad witch? My grandma is one too and has power over spirits. She's like the Grand High Witch. We've even got a few ogres hired on to clean up around the tower. I'm talking about hellfire and raw power sort of witches. Ayame asked in fascination, so magic is really real? And Naruto nodded. Yay, but this world doesn't have its ley lines developed yet, so no one here has magic. Anyone who does had to have spent time on another for at least a bit and gained their power there. Naruto clarified and Ayame raised an eyebrow. Well, I don't know all of it, but a lot of worlds have sort of chakra coils of their own letting amazing things happen. One of those things is the people can use mana, the fuel of magic. This world's young, so its mana coils aren't developed yet, but when they do in every world a huge war breaks out. The one I've been living on had this happen to it millennia ago and there are still horror stories. Tucci snorted with good humor. Tucci, who had a rustic sense of humor, laughed after saying, well kid, I can't say I believe you, but I can say you're a convincing little guy. School for witches. Next you'll tell me in realistic detail that your grandma has dark blue skin and pure white eyes. Tucci let out a howl of laughter as Naruto said softly, actually she has yellow eyes and light green skin. The older man laughed as he ruffled Naruto's hair and swatted away his hand, saying, oh you're a good kid, creative too. With a sigh, Naruto took out the cash he had swiped to buy the ramen and slid out of his chair. Ayame called out, don't you want your change? Before heading out to find a place to take a short nap, Naruto called back, keep it, I stole all that money from those pale-eyed guys anyway. On his way up, he discovered a lovely tree near the western gate that essentially had a seat just his size. He discovered that using his demon chakra burned and broke the bark, but using his wind chakra was similar to using his demon chakra on stone. He heard a Vic just as he was about to fall asleep. A ninja is approaching him. As Naruto ducked out of sight, he saw that the man exuded dishonesty and was carrying a bag containing a girl who exuded fear and panic. He swore, fuck, and organized a rescue effort. Naruto demanded of the Cloud Nin, who was holding the wriggling bundle that he correctly assumed was a girl his age, I can appreciate the kinky stuff as much as the next guy, but a bondage-loving pedophiliac rapist. What the hell is wrong with you? When the man threw 2 shuriken at him, Naruto just gathered his wind chakra in his mouth and spat it out. knocking them out of the air with a burst of energy and wind. His expression remained one of mild disgust and boredom. When the man went to the shuriken, Naruto claimed he had left emotion behind, saying, "Pathetic, a grown man losing to a 10-year-old. Tisk. Tisk, if you keep this I'll have to apologize to your soon-to-be widow." It was time for playtime. Reaching for a kunai, the man shot back, "You're just a kid, I'm a special Junin of Kumo. You really think you can match me in combat?" The man jumped over the kunai and embedded itself in the tree behind him, but Naruto was shocked when he disappeared in a yellow flash. "Yay, you're special, alright, I bet you still wear diapers too?" Naruto responded without being the least bit surprised. When a kunai came hurtling his way, he immediately threw one of his Hiroshin kunai at the man. The man fell to his knees as Naruto realized he had just killed a real, flesh and blood human being, not a hologram or illusion. "Impossible. That just you was lost," he exclaimed as he felt Naruto's normal kunai sink into his liver from behind, tearing through him like he was made of paper. His captive screamed in pain as her chakra coils twisted and warped, making it impossible for her to use it externally. "I deny you your prize, yellow flash," he yelled, pouring his dwindling chakra reserves into a special seal array he had painted on the inside of the bag. Snapping out of his daze, Naruto snatched up his Hiroshin kunai and ripped into the bag, letting go of the girl his own age, who had dark hair and pale lavender eyes. The pain and fear caused her to sob into him. Naruto waited for her to calm down and said, "It's okay. You're all right. He can't hurt you. He can't hurt anyone now. My name's Naruto. Now let's get you home." Hinata said, "I'm Hinata Hyuga." Naruto nodded. With a nod, Naruto sheathed his Hiroshin kunai, picked her up gently in a bridal style, and pumped chakra into his legs to cover a few kilometers in just 2 minutes. "Where do you live?" Naruto asked, and Hinata pointed to the Hyuga district. A man exclaimed, "Lord Hiyashi, Hinata has been recovered," and the stern-looking man Naruto had previously snatched the wallet from hurried out. A Hyuga guard yelled, "You, boy, what are you doing to her?" Hinata half yelled in distress, "Ichi saved me, took out a Junin on his own in seconds. But before he did, the Junin did something to me. I can't feel my chakra." The man Naruto snatched the wallet from earlier said, "I see, we have no need for a weak heiress who can no longer even use our taijutsu. Prepare the ceremony. We will place the caged bird seal on her within the hour," Hiyashi stated. Hinata tried to calm him while choking back her tears, but Naruto yelled back, "Now hold on, just what the hell are you trying to pull? There's no way in hell she could have taken him on. He'd even kick your ass? These are the Byakugan users, huh? And because she was taken by surprise by a Junin, they're now going to execute her." In an attempt to scare the child with his Byakugan, Hiyashi challenged, "If he was so powerful, why don't you explain how you obviously defeated him?" He was met with a sneer. Holding up Hiyashi's wallet, Naruto remarked, "Same way I swiped this from you." He smiled at the shocked and then irate expression. Naruto clenched his teeth and said, "Same way I painted an entire portion of the village in Technicolor. The same way I glued the masks to the faces of the Anbu wearing them. I'm just that good. And better than you, Mr. Masked in the ass." A tiny bit of hellfire flickered around his mouth, demonstrating his strength. "Give me my daughter, she is weak and will suffer the punishment for shaming the blood," Hiyashi yelled. Naruto returned with equal venom, preparing for a surprise attack by swirling his wind chakra inside the sides of his mouth. "Fuck you!" Hiyashi charged, prepared to sidestep to him obvious wind technique, but was taken aback when Naruto chose to aim for the ground directly in front of him. The wind's raw force blasted him to the side as he jumped in the same direction to avoid it, slamming into a nearby wall. As Hiyashi pulled himself from the wall, Griffin yelled, "Naruto! What in the dragon's name are you doing?" and materialized in front of him in a whirl of pale green light. Hiyashi attempted to rush Naruto for a Juken takedown, but was caught off guard when a blast of black fire shot towards him. Although he managed to avoid it, his left arm was completely consumed by the flames and ash in a matter of seconds. That bastard's gonna put a torture mark on his own daughter because she was kidnapped and rescued, Naruto yelled, pointing at Hiyashi with evident contempt. When Sarutobi arrived on the scene, he yelled, "Everyone stand down." His eyes were dangerous as he asked, "What has happened here?" "That little monster is interfering with clan affairs and attacked myself, the head of the Hyuga clan. Our laws state he must be put to death for his transgressions," Hiyashi yelled. Sarutobi yelled, "Naruto, is this true?" And Naruto gave him an unusually intense look for a 10-year-old. Naruto responded calmly and evenly, using a deliberation he could only have learned from his grandmother. "I saved Hinata here from being kidnapped, and when I return her home I find that a fate perhaps even worse lays here. While she is with me, she is in my care, and as such I will prevent them from placing a caged bird seal upon her for being overpowered by a vastly superior foe." Naruto, you know it's against numerous interdimensional laws to interfere this much with an undeveloped world, Griffin replied calmly. Griffin sighed as Naruto calmly questioned, can you in good conscience leave a 10-year-old girl in a life of slavery to her own family? She knelt in front of Hinata and said, it will be her choice. Hinata turned to her father in fear and then turned back to ask a silent question. The choice is yours now. From what I've gathered, your own father is now hellbent on turning your life into a misery. You can stay here and chance that or come with us and we will find you a place to be elsewhere where you can grow and be safe. Griffin said. Hinata nodded and shuddered as Griffin said, you don't need his permission to come with us if you want to. Nodding, Griffin said, all right then. Sarutobi said, now wait a minute, Griffin, this is kidnapping. As the green light began to circle all three of them and the missing disappeared into it, Naruto remarked, it's not kidnapping if the person missing wants to be missed. Sarutobi cursed inwardly, way to leave me a bloody hornet's nest. Cloud Tower. Where are we? Inquired Hinata. The smile on Naruto's face said, home sweet home. Hinata nodded as Naruto graciously assisted her in walking, as she was weak at the thought. This young one is Cloud Tower, the Academy for Witches. Now if you come with me I believe I can find you a good home, seeing as you do not have the proper temperament for witchcraft. Griffin said she only needed a moment to turn on the rune on her desk to get in touch with Farragonda, who responded right away. She said sweetly, ah Griffin, what a pleasant surprise, what may I do for you? My grandson has stirred up a rather interesting troll's den, magical equivalent of a hornet's nest. The end result is that I now have a small girl roughly his age separated from an obviously abusive family from an undeveloped world. Furthermore, she doesn't have the right temperament for witchcraft, but I thought perhaps. Farragonda asked, may I see her? And Griffin arched an eyebrow. Oh, don't get like that. We've known each other for so long, I know exactly what you're going to ask, and frankly I'm delighted that you still trust me so much. Very well, said Griffin. Griffin said, Hinata was it? Could you come here please? And Hinata cautiously approached and came into view of Farragonda. After taking in Hinata's aura and seeing the hologram wink out, Farragonda said, what lovely eyes, Griffin the first, except I'll be over shortly. Griffin pondered for a moment before hearing a knock on the door. Hinata was taken aback when Naruto opened the door after Griffin said, let her in. Naruto. Farragonda was present, but she couldn't understand how anyone other than the fabled Hirushim could move so quickly. Hello Farragonda, replied Griffin. Naruto chirped, hey auntie, as the laughing fairy tangled his hair. When Hinata nodded, she knelt down in front of the girl, adjusted her glasses, and studied the child's aura carefully before grinning warmly. Hello Griffin, and I take it you are Hinata, little lady? She asked softly. Farragonda said softly, my name is Farragonda, little one, and if you'll have me I'd like to adopt you as my own. Hinata stared for a moment, remembering the 4 years since her mother's death, the loneliness, and the constant tests that came flooding back to her. Without thinking, she rushed into Farragonda's arms, crying and repeatedly thanking her. Farragonda held the girl in her arms and comforted her, saying, hush now little one, it's all right, you'll be all right. Farragonda said softly, Griffith, if you'll pardon me, I have a room to prepare. She nodded. They left safely at Althea in a matter of seconds. Naruto laughed and scratched the back of his neck as Griffin remarked, you know Naruto, you have a strange knack for getting the best to come out of trouble. I'd hold on to that if I were you. Although I do believe everything will turn out just fine for that girl now. The assassin's infiltration was flawless. He was nearly undetectable to everyone around him and went unnoticed. He approached his target on a single wire, his eyes narrowly focused and sharp, and he prepared his weapon to strike. And Hinata calmly said, don't even think about it. Naruto lost concentration and fell painfully to the ground. He muttered, pulling back the microcable, OWW. While smiling at her, he vowed, I'll trip you up someday. A few girls around Hinata laughed when she said, yay, and candy will fall from the sky. Naruto had previously sneaked over to play with the only person his own age that he knew, even though he enjoyed pushing people older than him. A comrade in arms was someone his own age. As soon as he reached puberty, the teachers made every effort to earn his respect and get him off the hit list. However, Cloud Tower's student body was successful. Oh no. Whizgiz the leprechaun said, top o' the morning to ye lad, how fares your grandmother on this fine day? Naruto smiled in response. Naruto responded, same as always, on top of everything and nigh unknowable. He liked this teacher's sense of humor in a class of anxious girls. Who else would use mice? Whizgiz hurriedly said, ah, that's good to know, laddie. If you'll excuse me, I have to get to class. Don't forget the mice. The 13-year-old boy called after him, prompting the small man to laugh before disappearing. With her arm resting on his head, Hinata asked, so shorty, any plans for the day? He dismissed her question. Ignoring the taller girl's laugh, Naruto argued, "Hey, just because you got into your growth spurts first doesn't mean you can lord it over me." Hinata laughed and said, "Yay right, you're just a shrimp. You'll see, boys get their growth spurts later than girls and get them longer, I'll tower over you like an ogre," replied Naruto. She said, pinching her nose, "and you'll probably smell only half as good." He giggled as he said, "That one actually hurt a little." He protested in a sarcastic tone, "I mean come on, I thought we were just playing around, cut it out," before he and she both laughed. Hinata looked up and shook her head in response to Naruto's question. "Anyway, as you know, the school year's just begun, so there's a new batch of students at Cloud Tower, and I was wondering if I could tempt you this year into causing a touch of chaos?" Her words caused Naruto to pout a little. "Now Naruto, I'm a young lady now, I can't just start pranking people at random. Drop the kitten eyes." Hinata came back, and Naruto let out a loud sigh. "Besides, you still owe me a full day at Magic's, including lunch and a breakfast special." "Fine, I guess I'll just cause some hell tomorrow all by myself." Hinata answered, "I've known you way too long for those eyes to work." Naruto cheekily asked, "Damn it, what are you frickin' incorruptible? Going for the Saint of the Year award?" Which caused Hinata to swat at him, but he managed to avoid it. "And I did remember, the bus there leaves in 10 and I've got a hefty number in my bank account." Naruto laughed when Hinata remarked, "Well, I have to show good manners as the headmistress's daughter. That's funny, I have to put up a vicious and cunning one back home. It's a real kick too. Sure you don't want to convince a few newbie witches that they don't want to cause trouble around here?" he asked with a scowl. Naruto said, "Please?" And she shook her head. Naruto said sullenly, "Fine, we'll waste our time shopping." Hinata smiled, but he was toothless around her. The magics as Hinata changed from a black gown to a frilly purple dress to a dark blue jacket that unzipped to reveal a lavender bikini top and a pair of jeans with sandals, Naruto remarked, "Very nice, no pretty good." Hinata questioned, "You're just a cage bunshin, aren't you?" The clone said, "Aha, I'm busted wide open, eh?" And Hinata gave a nod. Hinata inquired, "Where's the real Naruto?" The clone exclaimed, "Taking a nap. The boss remembers the last time you took him clothes shopping, 3 hours? By the dragon?" Hinata threatened, and the clone moved to the other side of the bench to avoid the gunfire. "If I hadn't been taught self-control my whole life, I would have slapped you into next Sunday for that." As the clone set a land speed record to reach the original, who was dozing on a rooftop half a block away, Hinata said, "You go and wake up Naruto now or I'll use a kunai he forgot at Alphia on you then him." There was an indoor breeze. Hinata's dressing room flashed yellow, and Naruto staggered out after using the Hiroshin to get as close as he could. "Well, you've killed the shopping mood, so I say brunch. The Mango Dragon has a breakfast buffet that's still open," Hinata responded. Naruto remarked sideways, "The Mango Dragon? Sounds like hippie heaven." His clone laughed. Hinata responded, "By the way, I've decided I like all three." Naruto and the clone both sighed and gestured at one another. "You're carrying what? No way in hell am I on bag duty, you do it," they exclaimed in perfect stereo, eliciting laughter from everyone in the room. However, Hinata, who had seen this joke before, simply snorted in laughter. She and Naruto both knew that he would soon experience a growth spurt and no longer be able to be considered cute in the same sense as a child, so he was taking advantage of it while he was still able to scam people left, right, and center using big blue-green eyes to obtain a variety of items. Kyuubi red plus Naruto blue equals aqua blue-green eyes. His deep red hair with blonde tips made up for the slightly slitted eyes, which detracted from their allure. It had a few bangs just over his eyes and was all spiky, pulled into a braid. Consider the spikier Edward Elric from Full Metal Alchemist. He even garnered some sympathy by making a big show of his unwillingness to pay the cash register. Naruto shrugged when Hinata said, "You are impossible. You're 13, Naruto. When will you grow up and stop acting like a prankster brat?" Naruto casually pocketed the clothing and sealed it in a scroll, saying, "I dunno, when I feel some growing pains maybe." Do you know how creepy it would look for someone like me to be stiff and mature? This came after a heated argument over who had to carry it with his clone, in which the clone made a face and dispelled itself, leaving Naruto high and dry in response. Naruto said nonchalantly, "Besides, you're still a kid too, just taller, relax a little. I know we could make ourselves young again with high magic, but still the first time through childhood should be something special and memorable. We have eternity to worry about adulthood, so let's just be kids for now." Hinata groaned and said, "You know it's really easy to forget that you're practically a prophet sometimes." Naruto laughed, and she couldn't help but laugh too with a dreamy expression. Hinata remarked, "Here we are. You wouldn't believe what they have here," he said, avoiding a slap, Okay, but if I don't believe in the food they have here, I'm going to go hungry. As they located a table and placed their orders for the buffet and a pitcher of orange juice between them, Hinata sighed and said, "Cheeky little, oh never mind." Naruto sighed in response to Hinata's question, "Before we start eating, why do you keep bothering me? It's nowhere near the levels of anyone else, but still." While Hinata stared blankly, Naruto got up and went to get some food. He returned a little later with a plate full of bacon and hash browns. Naruto said, "You're not the only one going through puberty here. You just hit it harder. I have a vent which is all of the Cloud Tower student body. I prank them when I'm confused or frustrated, but you don't. You don't have a vent, so I give you a reason to go at me, and I send everything you do to me to the witches." For a while, Naruto ate a lot and was halfway through his meal when he became aware that Hinata was motionless. He scolded himself and snapped his fingers in front of her face, saying, "Way to be aware, genius." After asking, "Hinata? Hina? Hinata-chan? Hyuga?" Naruto received a forceful slap across the face. Hinata growled, "I am not a Hyuga," and then relaxed, "Sorry, it's just." Hinata got up to get her food after Naruto told her, lost in thought, "Easy to do on an empty stomach, so grab a plate and think while you eat." When she was up, Naruto thought he was being stared at, so he turned to see 3 16-year-old girls. He had a bad feeling about each of them. He focused his chakra to overhear them after tuning his hearing into them out of curiosity at the sense of dread. The person wearing glasses that resembled Naruto's and somewhat resembled 16-year-old Griffin said, "No, it's not the dragonfire, but it is similar." The person with the fuzzy hairstyle glared at him and said, "Yeah, this is more of a destructive consuming fire than a creating bolstering one." The final one said, "Isn't he Griffin's grand spawn? We'll have plenty of time to figure this out." Naruto recalled their identities in order of speech. The new students at the tower are Darcy, Stormy, and Icy. These must be the 3 witches. Then they do feel dangerous, and I was correct. They are murderers, Naruto pondered, and then an idea struck him. I guess I'm also a murderer. But these 3 feel like I killed to protect them. I'd be killed for my hellfire, Naruto thought. Giving them a slight glare, the 3 witches gave it back in full, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Grandma may be searching for these 3. He feigned a snort and raised an eyebrow before turning away, hoping they wouldn't try to call his bluff. I should tell her as soon as I get home. With a sigh of relief, Naruto stood up and walked away. Naruto, you're sweating. Hinata returned, intent on listening to them and observing through the reflection off his glass, without paying, but that was to be expected. He swallowed, sorry, it's just, Hinata, we have to cut this short. Those 3 witches are huge threats. Your mom and my grandma need to be made aware of this. Naruto replied as the man went by. Naruto said, "Waiter, can we get our bill?" And he nodded. Naruto sighed as Hinata questioned, "Wait, just what kind of threat?" Naruto placed the necessary sum of money on the table and added a generous tip. "Those 3 are the heirs of the ones your mother, my grandmother, and Saladin fought on Domino in the battle that destroyed the world. They're looking for the dragon's fire again, and your mother at the least knows where it is. We have to warn her at the least, or things can get very bad." Hinata got up in alarm and followed him as he carried, asking, "How bad?" "They could spark an apocalyptic war if they get what they want, and it's a guarantee that they will if no one is aware of who they are," Naruto said as he reflected as he took hold of her hand and began to pass through some one-handed seals. He told her to hold tight. Both of them disappeared in a burst of yellow light. Tower of Clouds. As Naruto led the brief pursuit to Griffin's office, Hinata questioned, "And Naruto, why did we come to Cloud Tower and not Alphia? I thought my mother was in most danger?" "Because I can only teleport to where the 3 blade knives are, and you're carrying the only one that would have been in Alphia. This gets everyone who needs to be in the know in it faster," Naruto clarified, and Hinata nodded. Naruto yelled, "Grandma! Big news!" As he yanked the door open and discovered the room was empty, he said, "Oh brilliant," Naruto said. "We can still use the comm room." He swiftly turned it on. Farragonda questioned in surprise, "Naruto, where's Griffin? And why are you at Cloud Tower?" "Hinata, they're here. The rebirths of the 3 who destroyed Domino are here as new students. Grandma wasn't in, but you need to know I ran into them and they thought for a bit I had the dragon's fire, but then were actually able to sense my power type and accurately describe it in comparison to the dragon's fire," Naruto yelled. Farragonda chastised Naruto and then asked, "I will be speaking to your grandmother, young man, about how you know all this, but you were right to tell me of it. Can you positively identify them?" Naruto nodded. "Their names are Darcy, Icy, and Stormy. I remember them from a few class lists I messed with. They recognized me too, but they don't know that I know that they know. You know what I mean?" he asked as Farragonda blinked. "I believe so. Anyways, you were wise in coming to me with this information. I will however ask that you escort Hinata through the passages back to Alphia. I don't like the idea of her in the same building as those monsters." Farragonda replied with a nod. The hologram dimmed as she said, "Good, hurry along now." Naruto calmly said, "Come on, we better go." Hinata nodded. A little uneasy at how quickly everything was happening, he guided her into a secret staircase that led to the tunnels one floor below and could be accessed from every floor and corridor of the tower. "I still can't figure out how this place can be found almost everywhere and it's always the same small trip down and I'm below the school," said Naruto. Naruto turned to give Hinata a disbelieving glance and sighed when she said, "Temporal distortion? You really need to read up on more than burning things. Temporal distortion effects are like summoning runes stabilized to allow a person to pass through without even noticing. This place, my home and Red Fountain all have them all over the place in case of emergencies and to allow fast communication." Hinata explained with a little smugness that he did not. Naruto threw out his arm to stop Hinata after saying, "Oh, that explains a lot." Calmly, he pulled what appeared to be a handle from his back pocket and activated it, causing a sword that was almost a foot and a half taller than him to emerge. "Tripwire. Someone's down here." The sword was composed of pure blue energy, similar in shape to Zabuza's but holeless. Hinata questioned, "What does this mean? Either those three witches are onto us, or someone's on my turf. Neither is gonna have a pleasant ending," said Naruto. As he stepped between Hinata and his sword, Naruto released a burst of dark blue energy, and the darkness behind them dissipated to reveal a face that Naruto recognized. "Well, isn't that interesting?" a voice said from behind them. After a moment, Naruto asked, "Thorn?" And the woman nodded. Naruto questioned, "What are you doing here? You graduated?" Thorn, who appeared to be in her mid-20s, said calmly, "New job. It also means you can't do anything to me for the next 6 months, and I fully intend to abuse said leniency period." Deactivating the blade and putting it in his pocket, Naruto asked, "So what are you teaching then?" He was unable to sense any illusions being pulled. Thorn grinned and Naruto grinned back, saying, "Mystical biology. I'll be bringing all sorts of surprises to class." Then he remembered the tripwire. Naruto grinned evilly and said, "I look forwards to it. Might I suggest a bloodgorger vine? It's good to know about, or perhaps the spider roaches inside the garbage area. A field trip there would prove very educational." She sighed and nodded in response to Naruto's question, "Hey, were you trying to catch me with a prank?" Both Hinata and Naruto flushed when Thorn said, "Yay, but mind if I ask who your girlfriend is?" "Ew, yuck, I mean no way. He's just a friend, eh? I mean he's such a brat," replied Hinata. Hinata blushed and began to stammer when Naruto said, "Ouch." He said, "I thought you were over that." Thorn smiled at the girl's uneasiness and said, "So who is she then?" Thorn nodded as Naruto explained, "I was taking a friend and Farragonda's daughter back to Alphia when we ran into you." Thorn questioned, "So what's a little fairy doing here?" Naruto smiled and put a finger to his lips. Thorn pointed at him and remarked, "Oh fine, be like that you little punk. Just remember 6 months." As he casually crossed the tripwire, Naruto said, "Just remember I hold grudges." Hinata then did the same. He continued to guide Hinata in the direction of Alphia after saying, "I'll see you later." "So how long have you known about the witches?" "This sounds really big," Hinata responded. "Since I was about 6, 7 maybe. I've been listening in on Grandma for a long time. I've picked up what I think is most of the picture, but there has to be more than what I know," Naruto said with a slight frown. Hinata exclaimed, "Well, what do you know total? Tell me everything." Naruto nodded. "Those 3 we encountered in Magics are most likely the reincarnations or descendants of the 3 witches that led the destruction of Domino, the beginning of Naruto." "But Domino's a wasteland, why would anyone attack it?" Hinata inquired. "It was a lush paradise before those 3 got to it, complete with a royal family, and they held a massive power source." As he put the pieces together, Hinata exclaimed, "The dragon's fire," and he nodded. "Exactly, it's the power of the same dragon from the very beginning. Anyone and everyone who gets their hands on it gains massive power, and those 3 want it," Naruto replied. Naruto nodded in response to Hinata's question, "Well, what exactly are they planning with it? Would keeping it out of their hands really be necessary? If what was seen in the past holds true, they're megalomaniacal and ruthless, willing to kill anyone in their way. The entirety of their time at Cloud Tower will be mostly testing to see if they change at all, at my guess. You see, alone the dragon's fire is just like any fairy's or witch's natural proficiency, powerful if trained properly and maybe with a few extra perks than the norm, but if you already have an affinity it acts like an amplifier, squaring your power who knows how many times, and if those 3 get their hands on it, well," Naruto clarified as they approached the end of their journey and opened the secret door. "Well, here you are. You better see Farragonda ASAP so she won't worry anymore. I still have to find Grandma and see what we can do about all this. Hopefully Hopefully I'm actually wrong and the heirs to the three suffered a childhood accident or crib death. Hinata looked at Naruto. Hinata. Thank goodness, thank you for bringing her home, Naruto. There's far too many unknowns with the three witches, so the sooner people get out of the line of fire the better, Farragonda replied with a nod. With a slightly eerie tone, Naruto said, yeah, I know. Problem is they sense the hellfire, and although they know it's not what they want, they're curious, and that can mean all sorts of things. He was entering uncharted territory with adversaries who would play for keeps, though he hardly ever used them. He recalled the manners Farragonda had taught him since he was a young child and said, if you'll excuse me. After a flash of yellow, Naruto fell onto his bed from a Hiroshin seal he had managed to make himself after weeks of trying. The seal was hidden in the shadows on the overhang of the walkway leading to the mini library above his bed, and he was certain that not even his grandmother was aware of it. He was mistaken, but at least he tried. He nearly tricked her, by which I mean she realized 10 seconds in you simply cannot get anything past that woman. Naruto has tried, I assure you. Naruto sent out a dual nature chakra pulse of both demonic and natural nature as he made his way to the central staircase with a plan in mind. Only Naruto, Griffin, and a few faculty members knew about its existence, but it functioned like radar, and anyone with even a basic understanding of chakra sensing would be able to sense it. Naruto focused on sensing the chakra signatures of the three witches, all of the students, and the majority of the faculty. Well, Grandma, Zarathustra, and Elditrude are on the roof. As he felt the general shape of their positions return and noticed how their chakra was fluctuating, he thought, probably to punch a hole in the clouds to let astronomy lessons happen. He smiled nonchalantly as he used chakra to stick himself to the walls and serve as a springboard as he leapt from one floor to the next. Inspired by a story about his mother, Naruto had imprisoned him in a closet for a week, and he recalled the first time he had used his radar, when he decided that haughty Alp Nightmare needed a lesson. And played a never-ending mix of rap and hip-hop music with a spell of dance compulsion. In addition, Naruto had manipulated everything so that it ultimately pointed to a random pupil who is now somewhat of an insomniac, remembering how genuinely vicious a pist of Alp could be. He thought ruefully, you don't want to fight an enemy who can slam you in the head from the inside out and has enormous shape-shifting abilities. After a few more floors, Naruto was standing on the ceiling, sprinting to a window that he opened, and then sprinting up the wall's side. He recalled the first time he attempted this, when he tripped a security measure and was launched into the air, barely catching his grandmother for a while. It deterred him from wall climbing. He then discovered a way to launch himself into the air by combining both of his chakra types with his hellfire. He was only able to make a few jumps and it was exhausting, but it saved his life. As she and her staff completed a huge runic circle that would create a large, sustained, and constant pulse that would repel all clouds so that the heavens could be studied, Griffin commanded. All right, now ladies, lay down the final layer so that we can retire for now. Naruto had once made fun of them by calling them minions in private, but the glare he received corrected him. Weather control typically involved either creating a chain reaction or summoning an effect. On the other hand, using magic to resist it was a high-level, high-powered move that even the greatest, like Farragonda, Saladin, or Griffin, would be reluctant to do outside of controlled settings. Griffin nodded at them without even looking at Naruto, saying, now, Naruto, I guess you have something pretty urgent to tell me considering you used the calm rune in my office. Elditrude, Zarathustra. Naruto approached her and looked up after they had left. Naruto nodded when she said, I assume you found the same thing I had. Griffin sighed as Naruto remarked, why didn't you tell Farragonda? This involves most of magics. I was intending to, but I've been trying to fill in the blanks. We have 16 years for all three that make them all unknown factors, and I have yet to find anything substantial in any direction. I don't know what their next move is, if they've already moved, or if they will at all. It's the singularly most aggravating thing in years. Furthermore, they have warded all their possessions so that any attempt at scrying is neatly disabled. Griffin complained and Naruto took her hand to soothe her. As Naruto said, well, that tells us a lot. It means they have something to hide. She nodded and grinned down at him. Naruto said calmly and preparedly, well, even though our home is a place of secrets, some things have to be known. Naruto recoiled slightly and gazed at her as Griffin remarked, yes, such as a certain seal array above your bed. Griffin shrugged and Naruto sighed, what? I raised you. I know your tricks. Naruto looked up, smiling, as she said, and I also know that I won't be able to persuade you out of sneaking into their room. Well, it's only those three anyways. Naruto crossed his arms and said, a triple room? That's weird. It's usually single, double, or quadruple. Griffin placed her hand on his head. Naruto scowled as Griffin stated, yes, the other roommate had a family incident and had to leave. Griffin nodded in agreement as Naruto stated, I hope it's just a coincidence, but I can tell you this, Grandma, when I saw them in Magix they were fully aware of me and they have the feel of killers. I don't think we'll have an easy time with them. After half an hour, they're out of the building, huh? Or protected their chakra, Naruto pondered as he selected their door's lock and slipped inside, locking it after him. He had learned from the scrolls to hope for the best but prepare for the worst when on a mission, and he was on one at the moment. In one form or another, he needed proof of the three witches' resources and intentions. Alright, I can sense some magic. Most likely the anti-scrying shield. It's triple-laced, meaning that if you destroy one layer the bottom one starts to repair it while the residue reinforces the second, while the first gets repaired stronger than ever. Hard to make, nearly impossible to pierce. Bloody hell, that's advanced stuff. Naruto was whispering to himself. As he explored every possible source of magic, Naruto muttered, "Alright, there must be something. Hold on." He picked up a purse and said, "Damn it, they probably have the stuff on them." Naruto read the name on the driver's license inside and remarked, "I see tricks. Poor girl." Before dispelling himself, he swiftly put the wallet and purse back in place after hearing a key in the latch, a clone of the shadow. Icy growled, "Smoke Stormy. Darcy. Someone was in here," and they hurriedly scanned the room. Stormy proposed coming up with nothing, saying, "Maybe it was the Griffin's grand brat? He's known for these sort of things." "No, he uses magic. He'd have said a ward of if he used any in here," according to Darcy, who was unable to detect any remaining spells. Icy growled, her eyes glimmering a cold blue with rage, "Someone, or somewitch, has been in here, probably a smoke user, and when I find out who. But there's no magic, they'd have had to pick the lock, relock it, then disappear with only a wisp of smoke in the 10 minutes we've been gone." Darcy began to calm down. Stormy yelled angrily, "Still sisters, this is not good. We need to find which bitch was in here and put a lightning bolt through her. Getting angry won't help. Save it for when we figure out who was here. Till then we tighten up the wards and lay some bait," Icy replied. Stormy said, "I get first dibs on the bitch." She could feel the electricity dancing around her. As he emerged from meditation after taking in the memories of the cage bunchen, Naruto exhaled. He discovered that he needed to meditate in order to produce an almost full power clone that could withstand significant damage before dispelling. Griffin asked, "Find anything?" Which made Naruto jump a little because she had snuck up on him. "Only that the scrying shield is triple layered, which means a bunch of things," said Naruto. Naruto nodded as Griffin remarked, "Yes, that they are exceptionally skilled and powerful. It also means they have something valuable to hide and that they work very well together. Could be the fact they're siblings, or maybe something more," said Naruto. Naruto shook his head as Griffin said, "Twins are known to have close bonds, sometimes even empathy." Griffin nodded as Naruto remarked, "But triplets? And besides, we both know that usually happens when they have the same monotype. These three don't." Before disappearing, Griffin remarked, "Everything indicates danger. Oh, and Naruto, I deposited the money for a B-rank mission into your account." Naruto said, "Wait, what?" But his grandmother had already left in his bedroom. He inquired, "How does she do that?" As a country hick harassed a girl his age with a very bony frame, Naruto asked in frustration, "So what exactly did she do to you?" "She was dangerous and had done a lot of nasty things," according to the man's tirade. The man exclaimed, "Well, she turned me into a newt." Naruto's right eyebrow shot up in sheer disbelief at that statement. He said, "I got better?" Naruto sighed again after searching left and right for cameras and asking, "Fucking dragon, did I walk into a Monty Python sketch?" With his eyes flickering with traces of hellfire, Naruto said, "Unbelievable. Look, you ignorant crab pusher. If you keep this up, then you're going to be hurting in places you don't even know you have, and it won't be by me." His body was gradually adjusting to the fire. In a few more years, he thought he would be completely fire immune rather than resistant enough to go skinny dipping in lava, though he couldn't stay in there for more than 5 seconds. "Then when I catch wind of it, and I will catch wind of it, I'll ram this so far up your crap hole that your whole inbred family won't be able to sit down." Naruto grabbed the man by the shirt with his left hand while holding a long, jagged, spiked purple crystal pole in his right. To his delight, Naruto discovered that his natural monotype was crystal, which allowed him to use them for a variety of enjoyable purposes. There was something alluring about throwing spikes 3 times his body size like a bullet, and he had already figured out how to make hollow ones full of hellfire. He asked the fat farmer redneck, "Do you understand?" And after he nodded tremblingly, he was abruptly thrown on his butt and fled. He asked the girl, who was blushing a little and partially hiding behind her hair, "You all right?" Naruto shrugged as she said, "I'm fine, you didn't have to help me, you know." Naruto laughed, relieved that he couldn't recall something that had apparently been downright nightmare based on his grandmother's description. Well, just seeing anyone given crap they don't deserve just pisses me off. I suppose it's because apparently I was given a lot of crap before Grandma found me. She inquired. Found? What happened to your parents? She shook her head in response to Naruto's question. You haven't been keeping an ear on the gossip pools, have you? Well, according to the most recent one, I am the end result of a demon being killed by a crystal sword that had a blood-drenched chip embedded into the ground, and when the rain came the mud was soft enough for my 3-year-old self to claw out of the dirt just in time for Grandma to find me, Naruto stated with pompousness before snickering. Wait, so you're... And I saw you at Cloud Tower once or twice? Naruto bowed slightly and said, Naruto Uzumaki Everto, Griffin Everto's grandson. Everto is Latin for demonic. You did? Yay, but I was practicing a camouflage technique both times, so I was pretty much invisible, Naruto replied. She blushed and said, oh, dashing off, she exclaimed, I gotta go. He called out to her, smiling, Sayo Lucy, before disappearing in a burst of yellow light and resurfacing atop a nearby building just in time to see her turn around, her eyes wide. Lucy asked in disbelief, how did he know my name? Naruto, who had used Chakra to catch it, laughed. Pranking people his age didn't provide as much excitement, but upping them in this way still gave him a sense of accomplishment. A red-headed girl who was a head shorter than him was staring at him and hovering so that she was eye to eye with him as he turned to leave. With a cross, she said, that was mean. What? Inquired Naruto. She almost put a finger in his eye when she said, you shouldn't mess with her head like that. I don't care what you think, she looks like she's a good person. Naruto's protest took the wind out of her sails when he said, look lady, I think you missed the part where I defended her from that country twit. Murta asked, you what? And her eyes widened when Naruto simply disappeared in a burst of yellow light. She missed the yellow flash because she blinked just as Naruto Hiroshined left after catching a glimpse of him playing with Lucy. After a brief moment of panting, Naruto reappeared in his Cloud Tower bedroom. A year ago, he had discovered a way to get to Hiroshin without a seal, but the drain gets larger as the distance increases. In that one, he overused his natural chakra as he recovered his breath. He remarked, I'll have to stick to my demon energies using that. They're limitless by natural ones, aren't? He was leveling out at an even 6 feet tall, a full half-foot above Hinata, and had, in keeping with his boasting from a few years earlier, risen like a rocket. Well, right now, the Alp ought to be teaching a class. No, he made it very apparent that I wasn't supposed to be there. Naruto reflected on the time a few months prior when he had hanged as the guy's duplicate and used the sexy jutsu in the middle of class. After 3 hours of the chase, Griffin ended it and put a 3-day time limit on Naruto's abilities. Fortunately, Naruto could still essentially fly because he had a long-standing fondness for ninja wire. He sighed, having nothing planned for the day and not really knowing what to do. Then he smiled slyly as he felt a familiar pulse after putting a bunch of demonic chakra into a sealless Hiroshin and saying, well, looks like Miss Prissy Princess is back for the year. He then disappeared and reappeared on the edge of Alfie's domain. Fortunately, his victim was not aware of his presence because it was behind a tree. Stella is accompanied by a friend, and I assume those are the girl's parents. Where did you find this stray princess? I don't think either of them used any magic, he pondered as he saw the rabbit pass through the anti-mundane barrier while the man crashed straight into it. That has to be a serious blow to manhood. Naruto realized that the man was too thick to even notice that a rabbit had passed through without any issues, so he missed it. Naruto snorted as Stella assured him, don't worry, I'll send you home now, don't move. She said the access word while removing her ring, Solaria, and it spread out into a staff the head of which was shaped like a sun. Leaning against the tree, Naruto exclaimed, cheater, even use her own unaugmented magic, in full view. Stella exclaimed, you? I knew it was you who sent that ogre. Naruto arched an eyebrow in response. Naruto used his Hiroshin to teleport directly into her face and match her glare, asking, oh? How do you figure that, princess? Got any proof? He grinned widely, his long canines displaying, but it only made it more noticeable that he had to look down a bit to make eye contact. Stella yelled, witch spawn, at him. Spoiled brat, retorted Naruto. She yelled, demon freak. Failure, he said, grinning even more. Jackass, she exclaimed. Dits, he uttered. Bloom, the redhead Naruto had gathered, said, okay, break it up you two. As she moved to separate them, she questioned him, all right, did you send the ogre? Naruto inquired, to where? Then Bloom said, never mind. Naruto became suspicious and asked, was the ogre in brown overalls? When she exclaimed, yes, I knew it was you. You're still ticked off about my dumping you. He turned around and faced Stella. Alright, first off, we mutually broke it off on what I thought were good terms, princess. Secondly, the brown suspenders are standard issue to the janitors of Cloud Tower ogres. All it means you seriously pissed off a witch strong enough to intimidate a very strong, highly magic resistant being that are well known for having bad attitudes. Just what did you step into, Star Sprite? Naruto asked with a smirk. Stella half yelled, don't call me that, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Can you tell me anything about the ogre in question? Anything weird? Replied Naruto. Naruto felt a little whiplash as he turned his head from Stella to Bloom and back again after Stella said, oh well, it was on a non-magical world first of all. To their surprise, he had sent a magical probe. Naruto swore inwardly and demanded, the hell? What were you doing on a non-magical world? Shit, what a fucking bitch you are. She's here. The bloody dragon's fire is in her. Hell, she's already had a magical sentient animal drawn to her presence if what I'm sensing about the fuzzball's right. He thought, never mind, I'm sure you're pretty busy, good luck getting this past Griselda though, she's a sharp one and holds grudges. Naruto grinned. Stella chuckled and said, oh, so she's still mad at you about the banana cream pie incident? Not half as mad about you blowing up a chemistry lab to find a new shade of pink, Naruto responded. In response, Stella said, touch a copyright. Stella said, I guess I'll be seeing you later. Naruto bowed with a flourish and vanished in a burst of yellow light, saying, well, I will be bugging Hinata later on, so probably Sayo. I still don't know how he does that without magic, replied Stella. With wide eyes, Bloom inquired, you two dated? Stella laughed to herself, oh, it was a quick fling thing, we never got past first base, although it's damn tempting. Stella said, oh right, before I forget. Bye bye now. Bloom's parents then vanished from view as pillars of light appeared at their feet. There are no worries now, I already know a way past Griselda. The office of Farragonda exclaimed, goodness gracious Naruto, you startled me, in surprise at his unexpected arrival. When Naruto said, sorry miss, I just came to warn you I found the dragon's fire, Farragonda's eyes widened. Naruto shook his head in response to Farragonda's question, well then young man? Was it that Stella girl the Trix are fixated on currently? No, but Stella found her. On Earth I sensed the power and it's everything I thought it would be, raging but protective and nurturing. Her name is Bloom, red hair, about a half-inch taller than Hinata with blue eyes, and is followed by a pixie rabbit without wings. Naruto replied, and Farragonda agreed. Thank you for bringing this to me, Naruto, although I sense something else is amiss, she replied. Exasperated, Naruto sighed and said, good grief, can't I get anything past you or grandma? Stella found Bloom while being attacked by an ogre wearing Cloud Tower issue overalls, so the Trix know about Bloom's existence at the least, so it's a bit of a step back already, Farragonda nodded. Naruto nodded as Farragonda said, you'd better go tell your grandmother. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to welcome the new students. He said, disappearing in a burst of yellow light, Sayo. A couple of hours later, Naruto was a little exhausted from all the information his grandmother had drilled into him, and he was strolling through the streets of magic. She had started looking into the ogres to see if there was a missing one or something. She was so passionate about this that he grimaced, wondering why it was so much more personal for her than it was for Saladin or Farragonda. Neither of them was as enthusiastic, in all honesty. Naruto couldn't hold it against them when he was receiving looks. It was quite strange to see a 6-foot mane with golden spikes for bangs and a long crimson braid, dressed in a black trenchcoat, and carrying a vicious custom-made black claymore as large as he was, dangling from his back without any kind of straps or hooks. He referred to his sword as the Ninth Reaper, and was quite proud of it. With the pommel holding an enchanted gemstone that would cause the blade to violently reject anyone other than himself from picking it up. The blade was made up of 9 black triangles that were getting shorter and shorter, with the tip of one triangle in the base of the next. Each triangle held a unique rune. It weighed roughly 120 pounds total, and each edge was extremely sharp. It was a nasty piece of work that had been tempered in hellfire and oiled in his own blood, but he had managed to make it with the assistance of his grandmother, Farragonda, Saladin, and half of the Cloud Tower faculty, including Thorn. His sword was this. There was an enchanted rune with a distinct effect in each triangle along the length. After 5 minutes of meditation, Naruto was able to summon the first rune. In addition to stating that he would find such a thing practical and useful, Saladin added that it was useless in battle but further protected against the possibility of theft. For double-bladed combat, he entered the second rune himself, which resulted in a nearly flawless replica of the sword appearing in the other hand. Hinata gave Naruto the third rune, which allowed him to use it as a ranged weapon by enchanting the blade to fly back to his hand if it was within a 1 kilometer radius. Farragonda, the 4th rune, created the foundation for the next 2 by enchanting lightning into the blade. The 5th rune, which Edeltrude had added, gave the blade icy properties. When Zarathustra added the 6th rune, the blade took on a sheen that made it possible for Naruto to literally bat magic away with it, including jutsu. Hinata gave him the 7th rune, which made the sword fly while Naruto was surfing on it. Stella gave the sword the 8th rune, which made it flash blindingly or emit a strong, bright light in a concentrated glow. The 9th rune was his grandmother's second gift, and to be honest, Naruto had no idea what it did or what it was supposed to do. It was so powerful that he was terrified. Thorn had enchanted the 1000-year-old ash used to make the handle with its defensive qualities. It was extremely rare because the metal was pure dusk stone, an ore that only nocturnal creatures could find at night. It was literally a large stock that Mr. Knight had donated for the blade that seemed to drink in the surrounding light. The dark gemstone in the pommel was the finished product, a crema copyright de la crema copyright that Naruto had assembled. In fact, this component made the blade absorb light like a solar panel and transform it into a mana store that the runes could use to activate. Additionally, it made it possible for the sword to easily carry itself on Naruto's back. But what was truly amazing was that the sword was growing a mind, capable of telepathically speaking and perceiving the world. It was a perceptive mind, but a stupid one. Naruto nodded and leapt high onto a nearby roof as Reaper said, "Master, 2 of makers are coming. There are 4 more with them, 1 of fire, 1 of nature, 1 of sound, and 1 of machines." He didn't have to wait long because Hinata and Stella, along with Bloom and 4 other girls, were walking down the street with the exception of Naruto, who was master. Reaper always referred to everyone who contributed to its creation as a maker. "Oh, I can't resist." Naruto jumped once more, teleporting right behind them, making the person with the black pigtails jump in fear. Astonished, she demanded, "Holy, who are you?" Hinata said pleasantly, "Hey Naruto." Enjoying the shocked expressions he was getting from the girls and his ability to quickly learn about their personalities, Naruto said, "Hey Hina-chan. Mind introducing me to your friends?" Bloom wasn't in a panic, but she was out of her element in magics because of the trenchcoat and BFS, big fucking sword. The girl with the long brown hair was calm and soon recovered her poise. The pigtail wearing one was incredibly vivacious and lively. Lastly, the violet-haired woman had strange chakra flows around a number of her internal organs despite her extreme calmness. A cyborg? Curious, Naruto thought. She questioned, "Why are you staring at me?" She flushed when Naruto said, "I was wondering just which of your organs are cybernetic." She said, "You can tell so easily. How?" And Naruto winked while putting a finger to his lips. Naruto shook their hands as they were introduced, and Hinata said, "Oh, drop the cloak and dagger deal, Naruto. This is Tekna, Musa, Flora, and Bloom." Hey, was Stella telling the truth? That your grandmother is the founder and headmistress of Cloud Tower and that you've lived there since you were a toddler? Bloom inquired and Naruto replied. "Oh yay, lot o' fun too. You see, you have to be cunning and downright nasty or everyone's walking over you. Curses, hexes, jinxes, traps, and outright violence is encouraged as long as no one takes it too far. Then it's all in good fun," Naruto laughed. "And what exactly constitutes too far by Cloud Tower standards?" Tekna responded. With his face perfectly straight, Naruto lied and said, "Somewhere below death and above decapitation." According to Tekna, "You're lying." Naruto frowned slightly and said, "I didn't know I have a tell." Tekna said, "Your heart rate increased ever so slightly." Calmly, Naruto said, "Ah, how did you tell?" inquired Naruto. "The skin above veins ripples slightly with every beat. It is difficult to notice without ocular enhancements," Tekna responded. Naruto nodded and said, "Okay, I'll buy that." "So Hinata, you and Stella still splitting a room?" With a squeak of shame and indignation, he said, "Stella still snore like a foghorn?" In protest, Stella said, "I do not snore." "So Stella, does Hinata still tie herself up in the sheets?" Naruto inquired. Hinata retorted, "You liar, you've never seen either of us sleep." Naruto put his hands up and said, "Okay, fine, you got me." "Anyway," Stella said dismissively, "this is girl time, Naruto, so push off." Naruto smiled and remarked, "Oh, just for that I'm gonna stick around anyways." A portal then opened beneath his feet, but Reaper was prepared and just began hovering while supporting its master. "Nice try, Hina-chan," Naruto said, his grin revealing his fangs, his eyes, which now perfectly matched his grandmother's slitted yellow orbs, and his clothing created an odd sight. Think of a yellow cat eye instead of a line. "I knew I shouldn't have helped you make that hunk of junk," said Stella. Hey, Reaper is an artifact class weapon. People would sell their souls to have this bad boy call them master, Naruto objected. An artifact? And you made it? The raw energy and complexity required for such a level are on par with expert architects. Who did you have assisting you? Tecna continued with renewed curiosity. There was a stunned silence after Naruto said, the headmasters of all 3 schools of magics. I also had help from half of the Cloud Tower faculty as well as Stella and Hinata, said Naruto. With goggle eyes, Hinata said, remember that you used your own blood, which was charged with demonic energies, as a coolant while forging it. Flora said, your own blood? Oh dear, didn't that hurt? Pain is just the body's way of telling you what's going on, acknowledge it, and it feels like an itch at worst. Naruto waved it away. Tecna questioned, how did you spill enough without killing yourself? Still, the amount required to hold a blade that size is roughly 10 liters at the minimum, which is over twice the amount the human body is capable of holding. Naruto bit hard into his hand to respond, then showed them the steaming and quickly closing wound. Regeneration fascinating. Your metabolism must be incredibly powerful to hold such an ability. Naruto smiled and remarked, hey, you should see me hit a buffet, I've been banned from most of them. Stella said, okay, Naruto, you've had your fun, now be a gentleman and shoo. Naruto arched an eyebrow. Naruto questioned, since when am I a gentleman? Hinata yelled, since now banishment, and Naruto vanished into the darkness. There, now let's have some fun. Tower of Clouds. Naruto reappeared in his bedroom, blinking before disappearing once more in a flash of yellow. He smiled and said, man Hinata, you've gotten quick on the draw. I'm still curious to find out what scam Stella came up with as he reappeared on a rooftop with them down the street. He thought, I want to see it fall apart, even though it's probably only half-baked because it was on the fly. After a short while of roof hopping, he was within striking distance. Naruto exclaimed, what the, Bloom's gone. Before his eyes grew wide as he recalled the unintended consequence of Hinata's banishment spell. He had been gone anywhere from 10 minutes to 3 hours, according to temporal distortion. What a bitch's son. You ought to know better than to use that against me, Hinata. He mentally cursed so loudly that Reaper could hear it on his back. With a focused brow and a chakra pulse, Naruto said, Reaper, I want you to find the nun maker with fire magic. He'd already sensed them, but none of them were even female. Then he got it, a wisp near the edge of his range. How long was I out? Reaper told him, and Naruto sighed. 5 near fire users. With just the sound of his trenchcoat flapping in the wind, Naruto asked as he leapt off and flew towards Bloom's signature using Reaper's flying and adhering abilities. Well, I'm a fairy, as he watched her get trapped in ice crystals, blasted back by waves of darkness, and hit with a twister. Naruto thought, maybe I was wrong about her having the dragon's fire. Bloom announced, trying a pathetic attack against the Trix sisters. If it gets too dangerous I'll step in, but I want to see what she's capable of. He said, Demon's Mirage, then he vanished from view, leaving only a faint shimmer on the rooftop. Bloom was soon reduced to a fairysicle, and just as he was ready to step in, Hinata, Stella, Tecna, Flora, and Musa appeared and turned on, accompanied by some music. What the fuck? He muttered as he heard the odd word winks being repeated repeatedly as all 4 of the girls emerged transformed, with Tecna standing out in a full purple bodysuit with a swept upward helmet, Flora in a single piece that resembled pink flowers that would flow in the wind, complete with a choker with a clover on it and a pair of elbow-length pink arm warmers, and Musa wearing a similar outfit with transparent mesh between the two and a pair of headphones. As he looked around for Hinata, he saw her. She was a fairy of space and time, creating dark portals to carry out her duties, and the only surefire way to get her was to be surprised. She was wearing a tight black kimono and female shinobi sandals, and she had a small pair of black feathered wings on her back. Though in battle there are no guarantees, Naruto half-consciously recited from a biography of his father Minato Namikaze. Looks like born fairies have horrible punny names, Naruto thought as he saw the girl's power in action against one of Cloud Tower's janitors. Canute was a kid of his litter, but surprisingly intelligent for an ogre. In almost no time, the poor oaf had been thrown away like a rotten apple. Icy quickly launched a minigun-like barrage of ice shards, and Tecna summoned everyone behind her to create a shield against which the ice broke and shattered. It appears to be made to thwart physical attacks with a high-energy barrier in a pulsing shield-like pattern. If the pattern is broken with more energy or if it is pierced, the entire thing will shatter with a, Naruto thought before Stormy blew up the shield with a simple burst of lightning. Yep, he said, time to get in there. As Hinata and Stella got up to prepare a teleportation, Naruto raised a crystal shield through the alleyway to block the ice blast, allowing it to dissolve and shatter before taking off, still under the disguise of his demon mirage. Stella was about to confess when he decloaked and landed, saying, "I might have been lying a little bit about Bloom's past. I'll tell you everything on the way back to Alphia," Stella said. "Where were you?" she questioned Naruto. Hinata was decent enough to blush when Naruto said, "Ask Hina, she's the one that chucked me into a time gap. You girls still need to learn about taking on more than you can handle. Even by my standards. Those three are dangerous." They looked anxiously at one another as Naruto remarked, "You'd be corpsicles if I hadn't put up a shield to stop the blast teleportation or not." "Hold on, you noticed that?" Musa inquired. "Yes, I wanted to see what you could do, and I was ready to take over when you arrived to assist Bloom. I should have intervened sooner, but for a moment I forgot that practically all of you are first-year students. I apologize," Naruto said, bowing slightly. "Oh, that's okay." Uncertain of herself, a bewildered Tekna said. "It's past curfew, so you girls had better go back to Alphia. Do you recall Hina-chan?" Naruto smirked as he asked. "Oh no, Mom will be very concerned," Hinata cried out. "I'd better leave on my own, Sayo." After saying this, Naruto disappeared in a burst of yellow light. Tower of Clouds. "Where exactly were you, young man?" As Naruto reappeared, causing him to perspire, Griffin asked. Naruto asked himself, "I just can't get away with anything, can I? I was watching the Trix and making sure that they didn't outright kill anyone." It's a statement rather than a question. "You're not telling me everything." "I truly can't get away with anything, all right, so I was pursuing the girl who I believe possesses the dragon's fire. She has made friends with Hinata, Stella, and 3 other people. Canute was the ogre who attacked them. The fact that she was brought up in a mundane world is further supported by the fact that the one with the dragon's fire exhibits almost no magical ability. The Trix sisters have yet to notice what is directly in front of them because they are still preoccupied with the Ring of Solaria, but it will happen soon." Griffin nodded as Naruto explained. "I believe we should use Canute ourselves so that we have a pair of eyes and ears in their circle. Yes, it would be helpful to have a recording room that shows us what he hears and sees this time. You're off the hook," Griffin remarked. "Don't let me catch you violating curfew again," and Naruto nodded. Naruto said, "Okay, Grandma, you won't catch me breaking curfew again." Griffin gave him a long look before giggling. She patted him on the back and gave him a bear hug, saying, "Oh yes, I've done a good job with you." "It's damn straight." As he set her down, Naruto grinned and said, "Well, I'll see you at breakfast." As she shut the door, she said, "Sleep well." Before placing Reaper on its stand, Naruto hung up his trenchcoat, said, "Good night." He leapt to the second floor without incident, stretching in his scarlet muscle shirt and loose black cargo pants supported by a burnt orange leather belt that fastened to a dark gray pair of running shoes. "All right, that Hirishin is as close to my hand as it is to mine. The Rasengan, the other original, comes next. It's probably for the best that I practiced the Hirorashin so much. It's simply incredibly helpful. And I'll have another ace if this Rasengan is on that level," Naruto said, smiling before snorting. As if he needed more aces. There is still no such thing as overkill. He laughed and began reading the jutsu techniques. "Good morning, pupils. I'm here to start the school year as usual. I am Professor Wizgiz, your teacher of metamorphosis, or as I like to call it, the art," Naruto said in Wizgiz's form, with Wizgiz as the hat, while he was tugging at his lip and letting it drop. "Of changing," he said, beginning to change with Wizgiz's assistance before hiding him behind the desk on the chair. "The way you look." He received some applause for saying, "Now in Griselda's form." "Oh, that's nothing. You'll perform better by the end of the year." "Thank you for your assistance, laddie. Now, could any of you students first explain to me why altering your appearance is so important?" Wizgiz said, joyfully changing back and leaping up next to Naruto. Wizgiz inquired as Naruto's shape faltered and then stabilized. He was wearing a tight white t-shirt that flaunted his toned arms and perfect six-pack, a pair of dark blue baggy cargo pants with a black stripe running down the side, and leather sandals. "You mean we're square now? I no longer owe you?" Naruto inquired. "Of course, laddie, I'll just say it now that nobody wants to respond through metamorphosis. You can carry out good deeds without interference when used properly. It's a potent tool in disguise." As Naruto got to his feet, Wizgiz remarked, "It also saves a ton of money on looking your Sunday best." As he walked out of the classroom, Naruto said, "Good luck. It took me a while to get this right." Wizgiz was now jumping on desks, and many girls were giving him sidelong glances and flirtatious winks. He said, "And since every ending must have a beginning, we'll start with this simple exercise." As mirrors rose up from every desk, Naruto missed the others, closing the door behind him and beginning to walk the halls, hardly noticing that he was whistling. It was odd, In Cloud Tower, he had naturally developed into a cunning sneak, where he would sing for his supper and whistle while he went, but at Red Fountain, he would get competitive and try to outdo everyone. He could compete with a few second-year students, but the faculty could just lay him out. Thank the dragon for regeneration, Naruto thought wryly. Hi, Naruto, want to come with me? Faragonda surprised Naruto, but he remained calm. Great. Grandma has been teaching Faragonda chakra techniques. Naruto nodded, thinking. Faragonda chuckled when Naruto said, I'd be honored, milady. I take it that you're not just here to pay off a debt. If you were, you would have departed by now, Faragonda remarked at ease. What? Can't I just enjoy the atmosphere? In contrast to the brisk winds of my mountain home, can I breathe in the clean forest air and enjoy the flavor? Faragonda chuckled lightly as Naruto asked with a smile. I suppose you have a point. All three schools have a different general feel to them, and it's nice to have a change of pace now and then, Faragonda thought. That's absolutely true, and you were correct before. The equation is not complete. Grandmother thinks the Trix will use the dance as a pretext for attacking Althea. Whether or not she agrees with it, in order for me to follow along and play damage control more easily, she will be holding a fictitious competition for the students. Faragonda nodded as Naruto stated this. It's unfortunate that some girls will be let down by missing a dance with such a well-known bachelor. One of them is my daughter. Over the years, you've left a lasting impression on her, and that Stella girl thinks you're pretty, Faragonda added, not to mention that noble and powerful impression you made on their friends. Well, it could be done anyhow. I had intended to accompany you. Do you recall the method I've employed to inflict grief over the years? The shadow clones? Faragonda nodded in response to Naruto's question. Yes, they are real illusions that can use spells to give you back what they have learned, even though they are easily dispelled. Isn't that one of those chakra techniques? Naruto nodded in response to Faragonda's question. As you are aware, I have an almost limitless supply of demonic chakras, and I have yet to discover a limit that is difficult to surpass. They become more resilient and last a lot longer if I use an absurdly disproportionate amount in a certain number of clones. Naruto grimaced as he recalled the time he attempted to read the entire library of Cloud Tower in a single day, after which he had been grounded for 2 weeks and still sorting through all the information. I do, however, have to be either in deep meditation or asleep, otherwise the memories that pour in when they finally dispel are like self-lobotomy with a spoon, he said. Faragonda remarked, oh dear, it's best to use such a technique sparingly then. Yes, I do. In fact, I only ever use 3 during training, a 1 for reading reference and theory books. Faragonda nodded in agreement as Naruto stated, 1 to work with mana, 1 to work with chakra, and I myself practice the sword so I gain muscle memory. So, what are you going to do? She inquired. Well, while a number of shadow clones follow the Trix under a demon mirage, I will be attending the dance myself. They won't be aware of my cloning abilities yet, and since I could be seen by them, I also have an alibi, Naruto explained. They'll be on damage control. Excellent, but could you please let me know who you plan to dance with before you depart? Stella? Hinata? Maybe Bloom? Or another friend of theirs? She said, and Naruto gave her a foxy smile. You forget, how I am able to perform all of the aforementioned tasks simultaneously. I could perform the waltz with all of Althea using my chakra stores, Naruto remarked, his eyes sparkling with mischievous intentness. Oh, you troublemaker, go home. When he disappeared in a burst of yellow light, Faragonda reprimanded him, laughed, and said, that boy. He always surprises you. She then chose to take the picturesque route to her office, humming as she went. Tower of Clouds. Naruto appeared in his room and stretched, working the kinks out of his arms and back. Using his natural chakra to cross those kinda distances was a little tiring, but he recovered quickly and liked the feeling of healing. It told him he was getting better and could do more. He grabbed his trenchcoat and reaper, changed from sandals to combat boots with socks, and stalked out of his room, fishing a pair of fingerless gloves out of his pocket and slipping them on. He yawned broadly as he neatly stepped over a tripwire of one of his more recent victims, trying to catch him in the very prank he used on them. This warrants retribution, Chika, Naruto said, grinning, thinking up a prank for the bird-based witch, which was mostly based, yes, around birds. A simple translation rune tuned to the common chicken in an unnoticeable location will provide hours of entertainment. He thought, his grin turning evil. He had learned a while ago to figure out individual tells and put 2 and 2 together quickly when witches came for revenge. Naruto prided himself in his lack of a signature on his pranks that had unfortunately become his signature, but learning to fake another person's made it ever so sweet. Chika was a flighty type of witch, so she'd stay far away from the scene of the crime and use something quick, dirty and simple. The black raven feathers that were signature for her magic pinning the wire to the walls were also heavy-duty hints. In a hallway, Naruto said menacingly, hello Chika. She swallowed when he placed his hand on the back of her neck. Did you really think something that pathetic would catch me? Naruto asked as he channeled the tiny symbol on his knuckle to travel down her back and activate in 3 hours. You'd better watch out now, he hissed in her ear, chilling the blood, and disappeared in a swirl of dark fire, a simple disguised Hiroshin. I like revenge even more than simple random malice, he said. His eyes flashed red and then blue with energy as both types of chakra flared into a massive aura one after the other, with the red one twice as long, twice as wide, and twice as tall, and the games begin. He said to himself, laughing, as he stretched carelessly in the sunlight on top of the school. This'll be the year that makes or breaks it, Naruto said comfortably, taking a deep breath. Well, regrets or not, I'm a little scared. He then looked up at the sun and said, meh, I think I can swipe an early lunch. He then used the Hiroshin to jump down several floors to the central staircase, then he leapt into the void and down another 15 floors, using the floor on the one above and a hand covered in chakra to launch himself into the kitchen neatly, avoiding the cook's sight. The man had a bad attitude, but he was good at what he did, really good, so good that he would lip off to Griffin and keep his job. Naruto cloaked himself in chakra and demonic chakra equally, causing light to bend around him, leaving only a slight disturbance in the air. Think the Predator. It was his ninjutsu equivalent of the demon's mirage, which he used when he didn't want his mana sensed. The ladle wrapped hard on his hand as he reached for a handful of chopped vegetables in a large bowl. You dumb brat. This is my kitchen. Go. Leave now. And I'll chop up anyone else I see in here for the stew. With the ladle in hand, the cook pounded the still-clad Naruto before pushing him out into the hall and slamming the door behind him. He felt fortunate that the ladle was clean, but he was getting too big for the direct approach of just walking up cloaked and snagging something, especially now that he was eye level with that bad-tempered blue-skinned fat-ass that hopped everywhere he went. Oh screw you, Naruto said, decloaking, and a nearby witch laughed. Damn Jiangshi, Chinese vampire Xianko's species. Jiangshi? Does the blue tub of lard represent that? The witch inquired. You have classes, don't you? Naruto asked, turning to look at her. Her hair was all white, and her clothing was patterned like a spider web. Don't you? She retorted. Naruto told her, I'm the headmistress's grandson, not a student. You receive preferential treatment, then? Oh, she said, that's really fair. 3 items. 1. You should have learned that life is unfair from the shit you received when people discovered you were a witch too. I've been here since I was 3 years old, I've learned a lot, and I consider time well spent to be spent honing and developing my abilities. The faculty unanimously agree that they couldn't handle me being in their classes, Naruto said, drawing her closer and smiling. This is the more important part, he added, and she laughed. You made your point. Fine stud. What is a Jiangshi, still? She inquired. A vampire who hops. In addition to their immense strength and speed, they also possess a few highly developed senses. The cook truly knows what he's doing because of his improved taste and smell. You might find jewelry from the poor bastard he chopped up if you look through the mystery meat he occasionally releases. He also takes death threats seriously, Naruto remarked. On that, I'm calling bullshit. She objected. It would have been fun to keep torturing her, but I was getting close to the ridicules line. Naruto coined this term while trying to lie to his grandmother. He could get away with it up to a certain point, but when he crossed it the game ended. So nothing till lunch, he thought, then tried to use the Rasengan, getting a lot of wind as he spun his chakra violently in his hand until it was enough to throw him around if he hadn't used the tree walking technique to stick to the ground. With the blue energy spinning wildly in all directions, he said, good thing I'm back on the roof. Let's see what happens next. Pulling out the Rasengan scroll, Naruto asked himself, okay, it's not finished, but the next step is to contain and maintain it. How on earth am I going to accomplish that? Something like a skin over the ball. VLAAWOOSH, Naruto blinked and pulled out the scroll again, reading it through. Sweetheart, he said, musing aloud and getting it. He focused on creating an empty chakra skin and a Rasengan beneath it, and it formed in a second. This doesn't seem like I did it right. Naruto tossed it over his shoulder. No, before he went 10 rounds with that fucking fox, he was unable to either throw it or put elements in it. I'll figure out the standard method, then add components, and then this is meant to be a big bad trump card. Huh? Is it possible to add mana? With pieces of stone stuck to his feet, he was thrown back 10 feet when he attempted to combine them in one hand. He whispered, OWW. From above, Griffin said, that just looked painful. I can't let my paperwork linger like vermin, but could I suggest using one hand for chakra and the other for mana? And could you limit collateral damage? She asked, and Naruto smiled. As the stones on his feet rolled away and blended into the tower once more, Naruto put his hands behind his head and remarked, "The whole tower is self-repairing. I could knock it down and it would literally pick itself up." She said gravely, "Don't you even dare try." Naruto raised his hands in surrender. Then he sighed loudly, "All right, I won't." Shaking her head, she said, "You're impossible." He retorted, "I am your grandson." Griffin said, grinning, "That you are," and disappeared. "Well, control one aspect of mana and chakra with each hand." The two nodded to each other, and Naruto spun the chakra with his right hand and formed with his left to add wind in. "Shit, it's destabilizing. It needs a solid edge." He mentally swore and forced it into a jagged shuriken shape. "But there are 4 mana, chakra, wind, and hellfire." Naruto thought, kicked himself up, and concentrated to create a doppelganger like Darcy would. Doppelgangers had all the chakra, whereas a shadow clone would have all the mana. The silver shuriken they held between them turned dark purple as his clone mixed mana and hellfire, creating a billowing monstrosity. "We must get rid of this thing." It took roughly 2 minutes for this attack to form and be used. 2 minutes could as well be 10 years on the battlefield. They shouted in unison and launched the attack as far away as they could, with the clone melting into a sphere of light that merged into Naruto once more. When it reached 100 feet, he said, "I wonder." He then produced a crystal kunai using his natural mana and threw it directly at the bladed ball of energy, connecting at 300 feet, and the blast's force almost knocked Naruto off Cloud Tower. Holy fucking shit. The 500-foot monster certainly attracted attention, but fortunately the enormous burning, bladed mid-air vortex was hurled higher than Cloud Tower so it wouldn't harm it. What on earth was that? Icy cursed as she and her sisters hurried up the stairs with a good number of the third-year students from Cloud Tower. Thorn and the girl he had harassed earlier were among the 20 or so girls who arrived. "What did you do, Naruto?" He awoke from his daze when Thorn asked. "I dunno, wrought a spell of annihilation. It takes a long time to charge up, though, and it's a bitch to use," Naruto remarked, scratching the back of his neck. "You actually did that?" Icy insisted on confronting him directly. "Yes, I did that." She looked at him as he said, "I'm sure I can improve it further because it's the first time right now." He said, "Goodbye," and disappeared in a burst of yellow light. "God, she gives me chills." He reappeared in his room, recalling the power-hungry expression in her eyes that was just an inch away from his own. Reaper stated, "Ice is cold." Naruto hung the sword back up and shook his head at its folly, saying, "Brilliant observation that." In response, the sword said, "Fuck you, master. Is there a certain attitude in my sword? What on earth? Since when do you have lip?" he asked, gazing at it, and knowing that it was staring back he inquired, but received no answer. "Am I losing my mind or what?" he inquired. Reaper replied, "Yes." There was no response to Naruto's counterattack. "Well, if I'm talking to you I must be. I win," he declared. Reaper shot back, "You lose, screw you, I'll just use my Phanto Blade today." Naruto flipped his sword, shoved it in his back pants pocket, tossed his trenchcoat on the bed, and sighed. "Besides, I need to practice my Phanto Blade abilities." Naruto created 2 shadow clones and a doppelganger unknown currency inger. "Alright. You work on the Rasengan, look for control. It would be a sweet throwing weapon if we get that." He pointed to the doppelganger unknown currency inger, who saluted. "You work on a mana variation but keep it contained." He pointed to the left shadow clone, who nodded, and added, "And you're on survey duty." The doppelganger unknown currency inger had gotten down a throwing Rasengan and was considering whether there might be a way to swallow it or breath out one like the breath of wind ability they had. The day went by quickly with some decent work on the Rasengan, but the shadow clone working on it got bored and tried to find new ways to create weapons, and he discovered how to make a crystal chain so fine that it would act like even more flexible and easily controlled razor ninja wire that he could run his hellfire down nasty. In order to get the Phanto Blade to come back when he threw it, the original Naruto practiced its shockwave ability, which is useful in combat because you can use it to dice up the battlefield and lessen your enemy load for a while. However, he still needed to work on his finesse a little because he almost cleaved himself in two and had to move his ass out of the way after missing the first catch. When she doubted him, he dropped a duplicate earring into her bowl without anyone noticing and walked away. The scream was something he treasured. Supper was, as expected, stew. And he had hurried up to the girl he had harassed earlier with an earring he had made to show her that yes, some student was in the dish. He crashed early but woke up early because he had exhausted himself that day. Sick reverberated throughout his room as he sat up and looked at Reaper. Incredible. The snoring sword is something I've heard of, but the singing sword? Looking at his clock, Naruto questioned incredulously, "What the hell is 6:20? Fuck it, I'll just have a huge shower," he said, scratching as he gathered a random assortment of clothes and went down to a nearby bathroom area. He entered one of the larger stalls, turned on only the hot water, and scowled when all that came out of the nozzle was steam. He sighed and added a little cold to get bubbling hot water to pour over him as he completed the lengthy task of washing his enormous head of hair, and an hour and a half later, he left feeling clean and rejuvenated. I'm not going into any more details. For female fans, all you have to know is that he's tall, strong, and soaking wet. He left the restroom wearing a burnt orange t-shirt, faded jeans, a black leather belt, and regular black sneakers with a dark red lining. His hair was shining and back in its braid as he walked casually down for breakfast, knowing full well that the cook would skin him alive if he went near the kitchen. Jiangshi was a nasty piece of work, and his punches were unmatched. Think Tsunade-level strength with an even worse temper. Naruto was trying to figure out how to match it, figuring Chakra would do it, but something was missing, something he couldn't yet, and his grandmother hadn't given him a random and incredibly brilliant flash of insight. Omelets, toast, and oatmeal topped with chopped peppers and bacon bits. He sat in and said, "Niece," failing to notice the onion in the omelet he tucked in and vehemently detested that cook, but wow, did he do a good job. Students. Many young women picked up the pace as Griffin said, "I have an announcement in 20 minutes, you will assemble within the auditorium. Lateness will not be pardoned or excused." Since he was sitting on the ceiling, it made sense that Naruto would be sitting cross-legged, staring up at his grandmother, and attracting a lot of attention. Now, students, as you know, the fairies of Alphia are throwing a party tonight, and once again we are not invited. He said. There was some muttering after Griffin said, "So I offer you all a challenge. Silence. The task is for everyone who wants to take part to submit a suggestion that makes the most use of your profanity. The person who can use their profanity to ruin the celebration and make everyone stop smiling will win." To cheers, Griffin declared, "Naruto, you may not enter." "What? Hurry up. I could get every single one of them in rags and spiderwebs like that. You know," Naruto objected, getting to his feet and snapping his fingers. "That's true, but I'm curious to see what kind of chaos my students might cause at these announcements." Many witches grinned evilly and said, "Dismissed. You may prank them some other day." She left the students to their own devices after Griffin made her announcement. "Do you think they'll fall for the ruse?" In a flash, Naruto appeared next to her and asked. "Most definitely. Keep in mind that they have exerted every effort to demonstrate their abilities and authority with ease," Griffin remarked. "It's like taking candy from a baby." "How simple is it to take candy from a baby, then? So what next?" "Wait until they submit a suggestion, and then I sick cloak shadow clones on them," Naruto said, and Griffin simply looked at him and said, "Sorry?" Griffin grinned in response to Naruto's question. "You'll know what and when if you just wait," Griffin said. "I trust your judgment," and Naruto grinned. 2 hours or so later, "I've gone over all the entries but this atrocity stands out." Griffin slammed down the idea the Trix submitted, saying, "It's downright disgusting, immoral, and depraved." The Trix sisters were in Griffin's office, with Naruto relaxing around the window behind the headmistress. Stated differently, it's the greatest. "Have you not gotten ideas from my own stunts?" Naruto asked his grandmother from behind, and she gave him a snarky smile in return. "Excellent work. Excellent beginning to the year. Failure is not an option, so I want you three to make sure this happens. Got it?" Griffin uttered those words. "Oh, Professor, don't worry," Icy said. "We're going to sleep tonight to the sound of fairies crying," and Naruto erupted in laughter. "Then, the dance will be a lot of fun." Naruto grinned and said, "I got myself an invite, and I look forward to seeing everyone panic up close and personal." "You want to keep your friends safe, don't you? And what about your girlfriend from Solaria?" Darcy inquired. "Since we've already split up, she's off my hit list for the time being. It doesn't imply that she is protected in any way. It's more annoying than anything if she can't defend herself." Naruto shrugged. "Thank you for the lying lessons, Saladin," Naruto thought wryly. "You're on the market, then?" When Stormy felt a hand on her butt, she tensed up and turned to face Naruto, whose illusion vanished. "Are you making a donation?" she pressed against Naruto when he asked her directly. In an attempt to agitate him, Stormy teased, "Well, either you like the idea or you've got a Phanto blade in your pocket. You can have a little bit of both, but which do you like better?" Stormy flushed when Naruto asked in a tone that an incubus would be proud of. "All right, you two split up." Icy grabbed Stormy by the shoulder and pulled her back, saying, "You can flirt later, Stormy, we have to get moving." The Trix hurried out of the room, and Griffin sighed. "Please, Naruto, I know you enjoy playing." She sighed and said, "I don't think I'm ready to be a great-grandmother yet." "Well, from the looks that run through our family, I'd say you have at most 3 decades before being a great-great-grandmother," Naruto laughed. "Go to Alphia, please, you're in pain." Griffin uttered those words. In a flash of yellow light, Naruto said sincerely, "Alright, I'm sorry." He changed rapidly and disappeared again in another flash. "Whoa!" Stella, wearing a very skimpy orange gown, yelled. Hinata calmly said, "Hello Naruto." She was wearing a long, simple dress with a slit on her left leg that exposed heels, a low cut that hung loosely on her voluptuous figure, and a small black leather choker to finish the ensemble. Whistling, Naruto said, "Sexy, you two went all out." Naruto said, grinning. He was in a sharp black and white tux with a formal white wool trenchcoat replacing the jacket. The white pants with black lines up the side and black formal shirt underneath were well pressed and clean. "Now," Naruto said confidently, vanishing. "Shall I?" he continued in stereo as a Naruto stepped out from behind both Stella and Hinata, taking their right hand each. "Have this dance, mademoiselle?" A few fairies nearby giggled at the sight as they asked in perfect unison. "You do realize it's just the one dance, then I'll be casting my net out to some nearby specialists, right?" Stella said, her tone devoid of any real venom. She inquired, and the Naruto who was dancing with her laughed. Stella's Naruto winked and said, "Of course, but until then, Starsprite, you're all mine." "Hina-chan, please stop being so anxious." She blushed more as she stared at him after Hinata's Naruto whispered to her, "Just imagine everyone naked." Unbeknownst to her, a little mana entered her dormant Byakugan, and she saw it up close. She was embarrassed and delighted by what she saw on her dancing partner. Hinata tried to elicit a response from Naruto-kun by saying, "Naruto-kun, I didn't know you naturally had two hair colors." However, he gave her a broad, cunning smile. She brightened even more when he said, "You know you would have only had to ask for me to show you." The song is coming to an end. Naruto suggested that she sit down and that he get her a drink. After Stella kissed him, she went to the specialists where Naruto had transformed into a ball of light and entered the one with Hinata. He sat her down close to the wall and far from other people so that she would have time to use the Byakugan to deactivate the wild mana, which took some time, but it was finished, and the veins that were glowing in her eyes rather than all around faded. She drank deeply in the hopes of cooling down. On the way to Hinata's request for a refill, Naruto noticed with curiosity that the gifts had been changed from their original state due to the Trix's prank, then changed back. "Someone's onto them. My clones will only step in if any fighting breaks out," Naruto thought absently, lamenting the lack of panic at the dance. A few moments later, he sensed some magical discharges in the distance. The Trix had stolen a small case, but it lacked the energy signature the Ring of Solaria would give off. Bloom had a full fairy transformation but had not used any magic outside of flight. She had changed to a theme song, and one of the shadow clones had used itself to brace her impact so that she was dazed instead of concussed. Naruto moaned, clutching his forehead at the sudden headache they were experiencing. 5 minutes or so later, Bloom showed up wearing a distinctive dress that truly suited her. Naruto whistled loudly from the other side of the hall, and Hinata gave him a playful back of the head pat. "Hey, it was a clone, not me," Naruto protested. "Come on, you flirt," Hinata retorted. "There you." Naruto smiled and followed her to her friends. "It will still be humorous," with a laugh, Stella declared as Hinata and Naruto showed up. "What's going to be humorous?" Hinata inquired while Tekna, Musa, Flora, and Bloom gawked at his appearance and then calmed down. Naruto said smoothly, "Oh, I love a good joke." Flora calmly and with a little giggle, said, "We changed one of the enchanted eggs that we swapped with the ring." Naruto, who still had roughly 2 shadow clones pursuing the Trix, said, "Nice." He was grateful to see a prank tonight after all. The rest of the dance was pretty good with Naruto, or was it a doppelganger, unknown currency inger? Before the gifts were distributed, Naruto had snatched 2 of the butterflies that poured out of the eggs, danced with Flora and Hinata, and briefly danced with Bloom, Tekna, and Musa. All in all, it was a damn good night. Naruto later laughed himself to sleep at Icy having a gray duckling follow her around and her new nickname of Mommy. He said, "Ladies," to the group of friends, Winks plus Hinata, holding 2 hands clasped together in front of him. Then he threw a whole swarm of golden butterflies that he'd messed with so that greens, reds, and blues were mixed in as well, flowing around the girls in a flying river of glittering color.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.